Is this thing working? Can anyone see me? I'm so technically inept I can't even handle YouTube. Please say something in the chat if you can see me and hear me, because I really don't know right now. Jesus. Oh yeah, I think this is on. Okay, so this is on. Can you hear me? See and hear. Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. Sorry for being a little bit late. I've had everything kind of running behind schedule today. This is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords. And tonight, I don't have anyone planned to be guest starring on this, but I have kept on hand my link to join. So maybe if there's someone interesting in the chat or something, or something comes up, you can now add a person on and have, like, for some reason YouTube still can't do multi-person streams, but it can do two-person streams. So that's, I guess, what we're stuck with. But like I said, I didn't have a specific plan for that. I didn't have much of a plan for this stream at all, except that I wanted to talk about one particular announcement that would, probably take only a few minutes anyways. But then other things have come up that I think are worth sharing and talking about. Pardon me for cleaning my pipes here while I chat with you. So, first of all, thank you everybody for being on. 45 people, that's awesome. All right. I'll start with some good news. This is not the big announcement, but it's also an announcement of sorts, which is that I have finally finished the writing and the editing / proofreading on my end, as author of Baptism of Fire. So now I have basically finished every part that I have to play in the creation of that book, all of the written stuff. And I am now sending that book over to Mad Scribe Games, who will be in charge of doing all the rest, putting in the layout, finishing the editing, doing additional proofreading, all the artwork, everything else, and then getting it published. Okay, so this is good news. But before you get too excited, you can expect that a project like this is going to take a long time, and it'll also depend on how quickly Mad Scribe works. So don't get mad at me if it doesn't show up soon. Get mad at Mad Scribe. But honestly, you can't really expect it to be here. There's an outside chance it might be available before the end of this year. Okay, maybe. Very slight outside chance if Mad Scribe is doing really well at their job. but more likely it'll probably be sometime early next year. It's a major book. It's I forget exactly how long it is now, but I think it was like 200 and, like, in the Word file, which is never the full size, it was like 260 pages, right? So that's gonna be like, it's gonna be like a 300-page book pretty much. So it'll be great. It'll be worth it, but it's still, it's now followed a further step from before, but we're still a far ways from being done. So now I'm going to relax a little bit, having done all the work I had to do before getting here and cleaning my pipes and everything. And now I'm going to get myself a new pipe going, because what is life without one? Here we go. All right. And going to take a look at your comments here before we carry on, see if anyone's saying anything interesting tonight. Oh, Meatball's just gotten close here. Don't know if we're going to see her. Let's see. Oh, interesting. Multiverse D&D says, honestly, how can 6 people in Seattle dictate to the entire world our game that we play our own way at our own tables? Well, yeah, they can't, really. That's the answer. But they can determine what the official posture of the game will be. And that's a problem because it can then affect things further down the road, right? Let's see what else you got. Oh, geez. You know, I'm getting at the age where I have to take off glasses to read stuff. Griffith Morgan says, I'm delaying my online computer game night for this. Get back here, pundit. Okay, I'm here. I'm here. L says, Griffin, you can play Hello Kitty Island Adventures anytime. Seafire says, how about a quick game of Monopoly while we wait? What else have we got? Okay, Ryan David says, you're good, pundit. So people are hearing me and everything else. I think we're catching up now. We're at the hellos, you know. Paulo Frota says, greetings from Brazil, pundit, thank you. Or I should say, obrigado. Judd Gossick says, it's a classic pipe clean and chill live stream. Yeah, more or less. Jonathan Clinker says, can you chat about the state of wargaming? Well, you know, I wouldn't go so far as to call myself a wargamer. I own several war games, you know, like the mostly like what do you call it, tabletop non-miniature war games. Though I guess I also have a lot of those that are like Memoir 44 and stuff that technically they have little miniatures that look like toy soldiers, you know. And I quite like, what was the series? The one that started with Richard III by Columbia Games, where you have like these little blocks. But honestly, I don't know a lot about what's going on in the wargaming field. I've owned some war games. I used to play them a lot. I don't play them very much anymore because I never have either time or another person who also has the time to do that whole rigmarole. You know, like it's a lot of production usually. Like yeah, there you can run a game of Memoir 44 in like half hour, 40 minutes, right? But most war games you're looking at a big production, and I just don't. I'd rather be role playing, you know. So that's about all I have to say about that. Tony Valenti says, "Okay, I'm intrigued by his ceiling architecture." Well, they're just arches, right? Like the beam up there that's literally a steel beam that is, you know, covered under, and then you know, there's this. It's a series of arches that are on the inside. On the top, my roof is flat, as some of you may have recently seen. And it is actually a patio, right? So there's even like a barbecue up there, you know, and obviously there's well, there used to be a clothesline. I hang my clothes in the inside atrium under the skylight. And yeah, there's like plants and stuff, right? So it's a whole other section of the house, basically, the roof. The one I probably underuse because I've never actually had a barbecue up there. But I've got friends that are much better at Uruguayan barbecue than I would be, right? So I'm never the host, and it is a bit of a hassle getting like all the meat and utensils upstairs. I don't think it was a very efficient use of that space. What I did when I got the house is I paved over an area and I made a bagua circle there for practicing the circulating style of qigong, you know. So that's what I do up there, as some of you may have seen. Warplane says, let's go, baptism of fire. L says, pundit, I'm mad that Mad Scribe has a full page ad for the Dungeon Hobby Shop Museum. Well, I'm guessing they were probably paid to put it up, right? And like, you know, that's, I don't know if the Dungeon Hobby Shop Museum still exists or not. I think it went bankrupt or so. I don't know. I've heard a lot of stuff, and not sure. I'm not going to comment too much on that because I don't know what's actually going on there. But maybe some of you do. Violence Solves Everything says, is that the Slavic version of Lion and Dragon? Yes, that's what Baptism of Fire will be. The Slav version L&D. It'll actually be the Lion and Dragon rules, slightly revised and expanded, adding stuff that has appeared since then in some of the old school companions, and some original stuff, some new stuff, right? Like obviously all the magic items, the monsters, All the cultural context stuff is going to be different, and I'm going to have some new classes. So all that's going to be in there, and it's going to be very interesting. It's early medieval Poland. It's Poland at the very start of Poland, when the Piast dynasty converts to Christianity and starts trying to create a unified Slavic state in the areas around Poland, and on the basis of Christianity. Griffith Morgan gets, how do I get RPG Wuss Boys to play my old computer Star Trek combat game? I have no idea, Griffith. Joseph Cannell says Meatball the RPG is coming out. That'd be kind of like, what the hell was that game? Bunnies and Burrows or something, but a cat version. Somebody ought to do that. Not sure that's going to be me. Rezial says, I shared your Told You So vid with the local gaming community leader, and he freaked out on me. Triggered. Well, it's nothing much to say about that. The facts don't lie, right? The numbers are very clear. Steambub says, so Baptism will be a complete RPG and not a setting book. Well, Steambub, Baptism Fire will be a complete RPG and a complete setting. It's going to have both in one book, right? Which is... maybe I could have done it as 2 books again, but then one of them would have just been like Lion and Dragon Revised or something, Slavic Lion and Dragon. I don't know what I would even have called it. So I decided to just put it all in together in one bigger book. It's going to be a really nice book. It's going to have everything you could really want in it. And obviously the mechanics, even if you're not going to run it in a Slavic, in the Polish setting, or even in any kind of Slavic setting, the rule system can easily be used. Like it is the Lion and Dragon rule system, right? So you can start using the mechanics there in your Dark Albion campaign, or if you're running, I don't know, Lion and Dragon in Greyhawk or something, which is kind of that would be weird, but you could do it, right? So it's not that it's a system that is totally specific to the setting, except with 1 or 2 things, right? Like, a Skomrozny class is unique to kind of the Poland setting, or the Slavic setting, just in the same way that like a Kimri Traveler would be unique to the England setting. But that would, that's just to be expected. Wandering Mage says, question for you, Pundit. What books and resources, would you recommend for those looking to create their own tabletop RPG rule system or other? Well, OSR otherwise. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what you mean there. Like, are you looking for books about how to make a good role-playing game, or are you? Because I don't know that there is one. Or are you looking? Are you saying like, well, what inspires you to make your own game? What I would say, I mean, like the way that most, I think, game designers operate is that they start with with looking at the systems that are really good and that actually work. I mean, well, if they're going to be good game designers, right? So the first thing you have to do is you have to look at Dungeons and Dragons and understand why Dungeons and Dragons works, and why, it works pretty much in all of its versions. You may not like all of its versions. You don't have to like all of its versions. But pretty much every version that has been Dungeons and Dragons, or most OSR games, work, right? The one exception being the only one that isn't really Dungeons and Dragons at all. And, we know which one that is. It's the edition before our current edition. But looking at this, you learn, what are some of the things that must be a feature, and you need to compare that with a lot of other successful games, right? So like, ask yourself, why is it that Dungeons and Dragons works? And at the same time, why did Vampire work, right? And are they the same reasons, right? Like, and so then you start having to look at the question of system and setting, and what are the things that matter, and story, and what role that should play. But then, you have to decide. One of the things you'll figure out is that as a rule, unless you're doing a generic and universal system, which is kind of boring actually, as far as I'm concerned, you're going to have to make a system that fits with the intention of the emulation you're trying to achieve. That's to say, with the setting, with the genre, and not all systems will fit that way, right? One of the interesting things about the OSR is that it has a very broad. None of them are ultimate. Like there are some types of games settings, right? That with the OSR rule set, I would have a very hard time believing you could do really truly well. Like I recently, not too long ago, anyways, I reviewed a Supers RPG, and I think that they did it, that it was OSR, right? And I think they did a good job with it as an OSR Supers RPG, but I don't think it was over the top good, right? Like it was, it wouldn't be my first choice, right? My first choice for Supers RPG would be Icons, which is a game that's based on Fate, the Fate system, which is a much more kind of loosey-goosey system, which allows you to be the loosey-goosey that you need for superhero comics genre, you know. But that's the exception, right? Most things with the OSR, you can do it, right? So like you can do high fantasy, very high fantasy, low fantasy. You can do hard sci-fi. You can do soft sci-fi and space opera. You can do almost anything, but then you have to know how to correctly adjust the game. And all of that just takes time. It takes a lot of practice of kind of and of questioning about mechanics and why mechanics work. And I'm afraid I don't have much more of an answer to give you than that, Wandering Mage. Let's see what else we've got here. Paulo Fruta says, I never had the chance to play a true wargame. They don't play like Warhammer 40K in Brazil, dude. And they play it here, and that always surprises me. Though of course in South America, at least here in Uruguay, let's say that all the official regulations of Games Workshop don't really apply, right? Like people just get whatever minis they can, and I don't know. It's funny. Tony Valenti says, I'm in Florida. We don't grill on our roofs. Yeah, well, this is, in South America, you do. Roofs are flat here. Well, and our construction is brick, steel, concrete, stuff like that, right? It's not mostly wood construction like it is in North America. I do have a wood floor in half of the second floor of my house, but those are like really old, ancient timbers. These unbelievably thick things that are, they're quite tough. Anyway, and I have you might have seen it, a spiral staircase leading into the second floor, which is also wood. But those are the only things made of wood there. And well, the central beam of the staircase is obviously metal, but the steps are wood. And it's also holding up okay, but that one's not quite as solid a construction. It had to be not repaired, but it had to be reinforced once. Tony L says, Tony, no, you just grill on the highway where the gator carcass lies. They just slice it open right there and let the asphalt cook it. Jonathan Clinker says, would you say to someone looking to start their own wargame rules? I don't know what to say to someone who's looking to start their own wargame rules. Am I like reading this wrong, or are people asking weird questions tonight? Like, what would you say to someone who wants to learn how to cook? I don't know. Like I've never made my own wargame rules, so I would imagine the process would also be somewhat similar. Largely, the way to figure out how to do almost anything is to take a look at other people who have done similar things before, see which of them have done those things in a successful way, understand what your definition of success is meant to be, which should be really the things that people actually like, right? Not the things that are necessarily the things that are praised by a tiny group of popular people, unless that's all that you want. If you want to be praised by the tiny popular people, then go ahead and do that, right? But Otherwise, if you want like actual ongoing success, look at the things that have had ongoing actual success and figure out what you can do to emulate that, you know, and that's basically it. um, Will in New Haven says, anybody have the gaming IP rights of The Expanse? Well, I don't, so I don't know. Somebody might. Rafael Andrade says, I got Dark Albion about 6 months ago, and I gotta say, incredible job on the research. Even for a historian like me, there was a treasure trove of info on several obscure personages I hadn't seen before. Well, thank you, Rafael. I hope you'll check out Sword and Caravan, which you'll see is, you know, similarly historically authentic, but about the third crusade and about the societies and civilizations and conflicts along the Silk Road from 1190 to 1220. And coming up, not yet published, but it's going to publish a lot sooner than Baptism of Fire, my book, Heroes and Villains of the Silk Road, which is going to be a huge collection of basically any NPC, any historical character that was named in Sword and Caravan is going to be fully statted and presented with a biography, and there's going to be an advanced chronology for DMs that want to run, you know, chronological games where they can work out in, you know, who they would a player character might meet at a different point of time in the year in different places, right? So you know when the action is happening and where at a quick reference. And it's going to be a big book because it's going to have, you know, like I said, big biographies. There were a lot of historical personages mentioned in Sword and Caravan, and this is going to like stat them all out. But some of them are like, you know, kings that fight in epic battles. Like there's the whole region is very war torn throughout those 30 years. And there's also a lot of scheming and whatnot, and lots of opportunities for the DM to involve players in like high scale political events there. So it's mostly for that, but it just because some of you might not be interested in that, but might be interested in the assassin class. I've decided to actually put it in that book, so it is in there. You can actually get the assassin class for Sword and Caravan, even though I'm strongly against it. Actually, I don't think player characters should be Ismaili assassins, right? It's just doesn't make any sense. But you know, there's so many people that ask for it, so I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to put it in this book, and that way, some of you are going to buy the whole damn book just for that thing, just for the class. But then I hope that you'll actually read the biographies. You're going to find that they're really interesting. Like it is interesting as a historical book, like as nonfiction, I guess you could say. But it's also going to be very useful in terms of adventure ideas and in terms of, you know, all kinds of elements for fleshing out the major NPCs in the campaign. So you should like that. All right, I'm going to light this pipe because otherwise I'm going to just keep holding it here forever. This is a big boy here. This is a gift from a very kind friend of mine that traveled abroad and then brought this back. It's a Peterson oversized poker. This is an enormous size of pipe. It's a long smoker. Okay, here we go. Oh yeah, that's a lot better. Death Angel Shadow says you might. Oh, Death Angel Shadow, I guess. You might get cooked if you're up on the roof in Florida in the summertime. Lived there for like 40 years. Well, you know, it's not like Uruguay in the summertime is cool. You know, like here. Well, I know you guys. A lot of you are Fahrenheit. I don't know exactly what it is in Fahrenheit, but it's pretty routine that in peak summer it hits 40 degrees in Montevideo. What's really weird down here is winter, because like right now it's quite cold here. It's I don't know. Today I think it's about like 9 degrees Celsius, which is very cold. But like last night it was 1 degree Celsius. It was like at the very edge of freezing, right? Water in Celsius. The reason Celsius makes sense to a lot of people is because 0 is when water freezes, right? That's like frozen. That's when it's literally freezing temperature. And so 1 degree is just barely above freezing. But like 3 days earlier, it was 29 degrees. 29 degrees is like balmy hot, right? Like really hot. It's like that's that's peaks. That's the hottest day in summer in Canada, right? It's 29 degrees. And that, this is winter that we're in right now. So like the winter's always been vacillating in Uruguay. I think it has become more so now. And I don't know if that's climate change or it's just because of, different elements of the El Nino phenomenon or what have you. But this winter in particular, like last winter was super mild. This winter, though, has been vacillating like crazy. Like you'll have 3 days where it rises up to like summertime temperatures. And then the next 3 days, it's almost freezing cold, colder than it's ever been, right? So I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. But in the summer, it's consistently hot and very hot, but people will still go up on their roofs or out on their balconies and do barbecuing there. And remember, we barbecue. We don't use like a little charcoal briquette thing or a propane. Trying to do my best Hank Hill there. I don't think I can manage. It's propane and propane accessories. The Char King 2000. We don't use that, right? What we do with barbecue here is you literally make a wood fire. You burn that until it reduces to wood coals. And then you move that under the grill there, and it's the heat emanating from that cooks the meat. It's quite a big process, which is why I'm not particularly good at it, right? I mean, I think that anyone who wasn't actually born here would not have had enough osmosis as a child to get how to be a good barbecuer. So incredibly, I'm not losing people, even though we're really rambling. I am going to get to a couple of major points in just a little bit. We've got like 102 people watching. My goodness, that's excellent. That's a lot better than certain other people's live stream channels, even though they work a lot harder at it. So it's nice to know. More on that later. Griffith Morgan says, Pundit, your show on WotC numbers reveals a real change in market. People are leaving D&D or just getting bored and doing other things. How do you see the rest of the game market for indies? Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that it's possible that there's been a recent upgrowth in kind of people who are 5e gamers discovering the indie scene, including the OSR. I think that there are some. I've seen a few cases of people talking with me where they've said something like, "Oh yeah, I used to play 5e, and now I've started playing. Well, I've started playing your games, Pundit, or whatever, right?" But I think those are just a tiny part of it. I think that in a lot of cases, because essentially a lot of the popularity of 5e in the last few years is in part a fad, right? And what do I mean by a fad? Well, it's not that there's, because there's sometimes markets grow and markets shrink without having a fad, right? So it's that people get interested in D&D, they're playing it, and then they stop playing it. But a fad is when there is something that creates a popular mainstream concept that isn't necessarily tied to a thing itself, and then you end up buying into it for the sake of that popularity. And then as the popularity starts to wane, you drop out of it. The people who aren't really serious about it, that are just around there because it's the current thing to do, those are the people that drop out when fads start to decline. And I think that for a long time, 5e has had a large fad element. It did so with like Stranger Things when that came out, and it did so again with Critical Role. And like neither of those things, one is a TV show, the other one's a YouTube improv comedy sketch group. Neither of them are actually D&D, right? But they became associated with D&D, and so then people joined into that fad, and those people are only going to be tied to it in as much as they're tied to 5e, because to them it's not about the role-playing game, it's about the experience of playing D&D specifically in a way that is somehow linking them to either the Critical Role or the Stranger Things phenomenon or what have you. So those people, when they get bored, they're just going to leave. And we saw that before. For example, when Vampire the Masquerade became popular in the very early 90s, and this is why it's an interesting thing to examine in game design. Vampire the Masquerade is really bad game design, actually, like mechanics-wise. It's brilliant as a overall concept of setting and genre. But a lot of that brilliance was accidental because the original intention that Mark Reinhagen had was for it to be this brooding game about struggling with your humanity, right? And it only evolved accidentally at first, and then when White Wolf realized, oh wait, that's not the thing this game is about. It's not about a brooding game about losing your humanity. It's a Machiavellian game of these different clans that are having all of these Highlander-esque conflicts behind the scenes of ordinary reality. That is the thing that really caught on. But the mechanics are actually really bad. It's a game that's always succeeded in spite of the mechanics. The mechanics do not work correctly for doing what they're supposed to do, right? Like, in theory, if you have 5 pips in a skill, you should be able to always manage to do certain incredible things, which it doesn't really let you do. Like, it's not and the whole dice pool thing is a disaster to begin with. So the mechanics had very little to do with the success of that game. And one thing that did have success to do with the success of that game was that it existed at exactly the perfect time, tapping into the goth movement and the Interview with the Vampire novels that were really huge at that moment. And so that suddenly a whole bunch of people who would never have touched Dungeons and Dragons started playing Vampire because it was goth, hip, and dark and whatever. And those people, most of them, when they stopped playing Vampire, they stopped playing RPGs because for them it wasn't about the RPGs. It's not what they liked. They liked the vampire thing about it, right? And it's the same thing with the people that are in D&D 5e because of these other fads. Those people are not going to be spilling over. So now I do think, let's say Wizards goes completely digital, which it certainly seems like they're doing, right? They've talked about it. They've all but admitted that the whole emphasis now is about the virtual tabletop and their digital efforts. So let's say Wizards does that. You're going to have a whole bunch of 5e people that are not going to be on board with that because the virtual tabletop and the type of adventures you can make for the virtual tabletop are going to be very different than the kind of drama-y adventures that a lot of these people like, and I mean, and it's certainly going to be, in some ways it might be better than the crap modules that are being put out now, because I think that most of the people like Critical Role are not really enjoying Strixhaven or whatever either, because it's slightly different things, right? Like Critical Role, say what you will, it's trying to have this sense of like high drama. It's very it's very goddamn millennial. It's not the sort of thing I like, but it's still something that is about kind of this high adventure. And the stuff that they're putting out now in Wizards, like Strixhaven and the Radiant Citadel and Wild Beyond the Witchlight, are like these actual deconstructionist works, right? They're these works that the whole point is to tear down everything that you like about D&D. So who the hell would want that, right? Like even the Critical Role people wouldn't want that. So maybe there'll be some people who'll stay on in the VTT, but there's some people also won't, because the VTT is going to look a lot more, I think ironically, I could be very wrong. Maybe they're going to create this incredible like Second Life style simulacrum VTT where you can just hang around and go to prom. Maybe that's what they're going to do with it, in which case it'll probably be even more of a disaster than I'm thinking it'll be. But I suspect that most of it is going to be dungeons, and so then or maybe very carefully cultivated Wilderland action sequences. And so the adventures that are going to be created for one D&D are going to be focused on that, because you have to make it so you use the virtual tabletop, right? Which means that they're going to be a lot less about like going to street fairs and trying food in the night market and then having a cooking challenge adventure, right? Because you can't. How the hell are you going to simulate that in a VTT, right? So that's going to be something that is going to change the game. And I think that a whole bunch of people that are not willing to go the VTT route are just going to quit, because those are the people that are there because of the fad of D&D, Now, another bunch of people might join it if it becomes a big deal, but I don't think it will. Like, the irony of all this is Baldur's Gate 3 is out now. It's a D&D game, right? A video game, an actual video game. And apparently, I mean, I don't play video games, but correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be selling really incredibly well, right? It seems to be doing very well. And the irony of all this is that the virtual tabletop, if D&D goes full in on the virtual tabletop, then Wizards is no longer going to be competing with the likes of me. It's not going to be competing with the rest of the RPG field. It is abandoning the tabletop RPG field. Its actual competition is going to be something like Baldur's Gate 3, because you'll be able to get onto your computer, you're going to sit down, going to turn on the old machine, and then you're going to decide, well, what do I want to do? I can go on the WotC virtual tabletop and look for a game of D&D on this simulated virtual tabletop that is something that isn't exactly a tabletop RPG and isn't exactly a video game, but it's sort of in between. Or I could just go play Baldur's Gate 3. What are you going to do, right? Like, I think if you're a gamer and you're already on the computer, you're going to go all in and do the video game instead of, pussyfooting around the virtual tabletop. Now, you might still use it sometimes to play D&D with your friends, but since it's only going to be D&D, you have to be a one D&D player to be into it, right? Otherwise, you're going to be on Roll20 or whatever. So I think that this is going to be their actual undoing, is that their project literally said our 4 points are, their merchandising, movies, which have now failed. They've just admitted that it's been a failure to them. They're basically writing off the D&D movie. Virtual tabletop and video games, right? So virtual tabletop and video games are both on there. But the problem is they're far too close to each other for those things to not end up in some way competing with each other. It's a bad plan. All right. Jonathan Klinger says, could you do an OSR RPG on the American Civil War? I think it would be interesting. Well, I certainly think a person could make kind of a historically authentic RPG that is, a historical RPG, I guess you could say, of like 19th century historical RPG set in the Civil War. I don't know, maybe the Red Room could do like what would it be, like Wretched Confederacy or something. I don't know what they'd call it, but I mean that could be for some like interesting stuff, like having like that style of spaghetti Western kind of amorality in the middle of the American Civil War or something. That it wouldn't be bad. I think if I'm going to write something set in the 19th century, it would probably be about the Wild West, which is a topic I've done a lot of kind of historical research on the Wild West, just as a personal. I don't know. I'm personally enamored with that era, right? With the incredible. It was like a moment where myth became real in some ways, it was the last great moment of adventure, actually, in our civilization. So that, at least of adventure with discovery, So like it was the building of something new. Anyway, what the hell? Okay, I have just gotten a super chat, which is really weird because I didn't think I could get super chats. Well, thank you. Who was that? I just feel like this. It got me by surprise. Michael McLaughlin. It says, if I remember many years ago, Neverwinter Nights had a dungeon builder and you could make servers. That's what I want. Okay, well, makes sense. I thank you. I don't know. I'm a bit confused by how that just happened. I'm not sure. Okay, apparently, guys, I can now make super chats. I'm guessing because for a long time there was like I think it was probably more to do with Uruguayan government bureaucracy than anything else. You couldn't do super chats in a Uruguayan channel. I guess now you can. I hope that money actually, I'm sure it will, because I'm set up monetized for advertising, right? Like for video ads. So I'm guessing that the money just goes to the same place. I don't know if any of you get super chats, please let me know. All right, let's keep looking here. CIE A-level psychology, enjoying Invisible College, much of it grounded in actual history, but I was wondering why MI13 was chosen as the UK occult agency, since this organization is associated mostly with the Marvel universe. Really? I had no idea that there was an MI13 in the Marvel universe. I picked it because you know, it's MI13. Are you sure that's not real? Because you know, military intelligence is numbered according to categories, and there is in military intelligence, there's an MI14. Are you so sure that there isn't an MI13? Seafire says, I'm assuming you'll include Slavic superstition, supernatural lore. So in Baptism of Fire, yeah, I'm gonna have a whole section on Slavic paganism, right, and Slavic magic and folk magic of Slavic pagans. It's gonna be. I've done a lot of research on this because I mean, this is not an area that I was a huge expert on, so I could have some mistakes in there actually. But I did a ton of research in preparation over the last more than a year of research in before I even got started making the setting parts. So it's been a big effort of uncovering this stuff. And of course, like Slavic paganism and pre-Christian Slavic magic and all that stuff is a lot less. There's a lot less info than there is about the Vikings, for example, because the Vikings kept records and the Slavic stuff is mostly lost, right? So there is some stuff in there that is supposition, right? But you know, the bestiary is full of all the Slavic monsters. It's the sort of thing a lot of people are saying, you know, it's funny, I never read The Witcher, I never watched The Witcher, I never played The Witcher. Not any of the three things it's been on, not books, video games, or TV. But a lot of people I've talked to about Baptism of Fire saying, yeah, this is going to be the Witcher RPG. You know, I even have, you know, the Witch Hunter as a class, which is a guy who is mainly a fighter, but also understands some magic to fight monsters and witches and things like that. So, you know, it's going to have all the monsters from the Witcher series, I guess, or the historical versions of them. I think in the Witcher series they probably have monsters that are similar to the traditional monsters but different. Multiverse D&D says, how can D&D Beyond have 80K plus survey responses when book sales are so low? Well, it's simple because there's still a lot of people that play D&D without buying any books, right? Like a lot of people buy the 3 core books. Like in this statistical data that showed up about the sales in like brick and mortar stores, bookstores, the 3 main books, the 3 core books sold orders of magnitude more than anything else. So there's a ton of gamers that play, for them to play D&D, they buy the 3 big books and that's it. They don't buy anything else. Osiris says, Pundit, to be honest, I was kind of hoping you were making a Darkest Dungeon style RPG. Canafel says, of these 3, which do you love the most? First edition, second edition, or basic D&D? Of the 3, it depends what you mean by basic D&D. I think if you mean basic expert D&D, like, you know, the BECMI series, then that's what I love the most, right? Like the Rule Cyclopedia to me is the greatest overall best winner of official versions of D&D. Now, best Dungeon Master's Guide is definitely the first edition AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide, right? Second edition doesn't win much of anything. It had a few interesting new settings. But for me, in terms of what I think is the closest to the root game, like you see this with the OSR, right? Like that, a lot of the defaults in OSR design are inspired by basic expert D&D. Things like the 2d6 reaction roll and the 2d6 morale roll, right? Those sort of things. Steambub says, I want to try L&D with the Pendragon campaign. Well, that's literally what the campaign I'm running right now in Lion and Dragon, and it's been great fun. You know, we're really enjoying it. There are a couple of people in the group who had never played anything Arthurian, and then there was a couple of people in the group that were Pendragon fans, right? One of them was the guy that played. I ran the entire Great Pendragon campaign many years ago, and one of the members of this current L&D group was in that campaign. So he is playing essentially the same story in the same setting but with a different system, and he's quite having a good time, I think. Ben says, would you ever write a how to write RPGs book? No, I don't think so. I think a book alone is not going to do it for you. Like there isn't a simple formula of how to write an RPG. One of the things, like a lot of the things aren't to do with like figuring out some kind of hack for it, right? Like the two main things that you have to do is very careful analysis of what makes a good RPG by looking and comparatively at RPG production. And then the other thing to write, to actually get to the writing, the main thing that you need is discipline, right? Like it's not actually, it's a craft, right? Like it's not a work of great genius to craft together. There are things that, there are skills that you will gradually get better at over time. So for example, knowing how to do good random tables. To my surprise, I never really thought about this before I started making RPGs. And actually, I never really thought about this until I started comparing my products to Venger's. But then I realized, yes, there is a craft. There is it is a specific skill to be able to put together a coherent random table, which Venger would fail at so often. And I would look at mine and I'd go, no, wait, mine are better. But also, mine keep getting better, right? Like they're better than there used to be. And I realized that, a random table shouldn't be random. Like that's the trigger. Like the table is meant to be rolled randomly, but it should be really carefully coherent in terms of, how many variables you want to have, how much difference of stuff you want to have. If you want there to be a range that goes from like weird to normal or vice versa, or from tough to easy, you have to figure out what the probabilities should be for whether you want like common results or uncommon or rare results, or is it just going to be something where everything has an equal chance? All of those things go into effect into the craft of making a decent random table. And basically, that sort of thinking has to be applied to almost every part of creating mechanics and designing settings and what have you. I don't know. I don't think I could make a book about that. I could probably make like a series of videos. I could do like a video lecture series that you can get on Patreon or something, but I don't think I'm going to. I'm sorry. Jonathan Clinker goes, any book recommendations for researching Hermeticism? Yes. Hermetic Magic by Stephen Flowers. And, The Golden Dawn by Israel Regardier. And The Golden Builders by Tobias Churton. And I think if you start with like those three, or even really just the first one and the last one, the middle one is actually like going to have all the rituals of the Golden Dawn and stuff. And so like if you're looking for a book that has like material on like what Victorian magic looked like, that's a good way to do it. I mean, looking at the actual magic books is a good way to do it these days to know a bit about how it works. But if what you're looking is like reference on Hermeticism, the first and the last book I said there, Hermetic Magic by Stephen Flowers, and the Golden Builders by Tobias Churton are really, really good sources. There are others too, but I mean those are the first ones that come to mind. Jesus, we've got a lot of comments. I'm eventually going to get to a point about a certain hate video, but we'll have to wait. And then I'm also going to have a big announcement, which will also have to wait. But right now, people are still streaming in, so that's very nice. Let's see what other comment. I'm going to have to skip a few of these because otherwise I'm never going to get caught up here. Garant said, wait, what country are you from originally and why did you move to South America? Well, I was born in Canada. I'm kind of, you know how they say, I don't know, was it the Lotus Eaters, Sargon of Akkad says that, you've got people that are from somewhere and people that are from nowhere, right? Or theoretically, if you want to be nice, from anywhere, right? Well, which is to say you got, the common man and then you have these like internationalist upper classes or whatever. I was one of the latter. Like I have a family that is from everywhere. Or from anywhere, let's put it that way. And spent a lot of my life, even as from a very young age, traveling. I was actually probably in an airplane when I was in the womb, But I mostly grew up in Canada. I was born in Canada, and I mostly grew up in Canada. but I'm half Latino, and at one point in the early 2000s, I started to kind of travel on my own all around the world, and I went to a lot of places. And part of it, I wanted to go to South America on account of my mother is Latina. Um, and I ended up in Uruguay, and I liked it so much that I decided to stay, and that's it. I would my job. Some people keep trying to claim I've got a trust fund or something. I don't, right? Like I actually, I my family has certain resources, but I have specifically never gotten a penny of money from my family wealth or anything like that. I everything I've done myself. I think I read Watchmen at the wrong moment and decided to be Ozymandias or something. Like screw it, I'm giving up my family wealth and we'll make it on the power of my own Nietzschean strength. And I did. So I guess it worked out, right? Though it was more about me like kind of spending about a decade being this kind of hippie academic, and then just hippie drop out, getting into like really weird places of the magical world, and doing whatever I kind of felt like, and not having a penny to my name, and then stumbling into situations of suddenly getting opportunities that emerged that I think are a product of kind of my, you could say, like spiritual cultivation that has led me to different places. And so I was working in a job that was like an online job. Like I'm talking about the very early 2000s. So that was super rare. Nowadays, being like a digital nomad is really, really common. But back then it wasn't. And since I could work anywhere, I decided to say, well, screw it. Like I literally had a return ticket to Canada, but I just tore it up. Um, so let's see what else there is. You guys have got some really strange questions tonight. Like, I don't know. Griffith says Pundit keeps talking about his wood, and now I feel awkward. Sorry. People from East Tennessee. The Edgelord says, I took your advice on pipes, Pundit. Went with an odd brand that wasn't shredded, but a cake. Okay, well, I hope you liked it. If you remember the name of the brand, let me know. I can tell you if I've tried it. Good Morning says, I'm in a part of Florida called Denver, Colorado. What else have we got here? Xavier Parnell says, why are there so many fugly creators in the OSR? And then there's you looking so dignified. But well, I don't know. I mean, I don't think I'm gonna win any, any modeling gigs or something, but I don't really have an answer to that. I think that the most attractive, I'm not even the most attractive person on, or at least the most attractive living thing in my YouTube channel, and I'm like the only human in it, so we all know that everybody's really here for Meatball. Meatball right now is sitting around elsewhere. She gets a lot more like curled up and still when it's cold, so I don't think she's going to come over here unless she decides she's going to like force me to oblige her to sit on the lap. Steambub says, I need to get my hand on proper corncob pipes. Okay, do a search on the internet for Missouri Meerschaum, the Missouri Meerschaum Company. Right, their pipes are corncob pipes like this one. I absolutely love corncob pipes. They're amazing. I know they kind of don't match the I don't know the humanities professor look, but they're wonderful pipes because corncob pipes. These are the Missouri Meerschaum brand pipes like these. As you can see, they're like really works of art. They cost, depending on the size and shape, between like I don't know $8 to $15. Right? They're cheap. They're really like when you consider that a pipe like this, which is briarwood, costs like $350 or something like that. So they are unbelievably inexpensive. You can go literally online. You can order them online. You know, they're super cheap, and you know, usually I believe they ship all over the world. So check that out. Missouri Meerschaum Pipe Company. They make the best corncob pipes in the world. Retro Arcade fan says, Pundit, are you in a witness protection program? No. if I was, I'd be pretty stupid showing up on video, right? Eric C says 9 Celsius isn't cold. That is light jacket weather. Well, it's cold if you're not living in a part of the world that has like much colder winters, and therefore houses end up being insulated, right? Like here, most houses aren't insulated. So 9 degrees Celsius is cold because it's chilly indoors. You know, most houses here don't have, you know, built-in indoor heating either. So that feels cold here on the inside. Like it's really weird because as a Canadian, I'm totally agree with you. Like if I'm outside and it's 9 degrees Celsius, I don't feel cold at all, right? Whereas my fellow Uruguayans are freezing their asses off outside. They're shivering outside when it's 9 degrees. And I'm like, no, this is fine, right? But as soon as I go inside and it's 9 degrees Celsius, then I'm the one that's shivering because I'm expecting it to be warm indoors, right? And it's not. Same temperature, but different results. Griffith Morgan says, no one ever comments on how suave Pundit is. I guess there's a lot of other things to comment on first, maybe. Tony Valenti says, there's 2 types of countries, those that use the metric system and those that went to the moon. Eric C says, I use a charcoal grill. The smoky flavor is amazing. Pundit probably gets the same results from a wood fire. Yeah, well, that's the secret, right? Is it does really affect the flavor. And also, you know, it means that I guess it's also about how long you take to cook it, right? Like Uruguayan style barbecue is a slow process. It takes its time, and they do it. You know, it ends up being like when it's done by someone who knows what they're doing. You know, it ends up being incredibly flavorful, very juicy. You know, really excellent. Hi Pundit, it is I Edmund, the greatest wizard ever, says the Dark Mist. The Dark Mist is part of my Sword and Caravan campaign. Good to see you here. Let's see. I think I'm starting to catch up here because I'm skipping some stuff. I always end up having to skip stuff because I try to give attention to every single comment, but you know, if I do that, I'm never going to be done the chat because it's like it's always being added to, especially once you've got like Jesus, 124 people watching. That's just crazy. But thank you guys. Thank you all for watching. If some of you are new here, well, please subscribe if you're enjoying this, and check out my other videos, and hit the like button, and share this everywhere you can. And apparently now you can even do a super chat if you want to. So thank you to the one guy who figured that out. I was not aware, but apparently I can now. So great. If you want to do super chat, go ahead. But honestly, you know, like I will be very grateful for a super chat. But one thing I'm going to say is I am never going to be one of those guys that will only read comments that are done by super chat. I guess if you do a super chat, I pretty much will feel like I have to read that one out. So that'll still kind of maybe give you an edge, maybe. But you know, if your comments are interesting, I'm going to read them out anyways. And you know, of course, if you send me a super chat with something really offensive, I might not read it out loud. But to me, like, still the best way for you to show your support, as it were, is to check out my products. You know, stuff like Arrows of Indra or Cults of Chaos, or The Invisible College, just to name a few. Or Dark Albion. Here's Dark Albion with the alternate cover version. How many of you know where you can buy this? Okay, so like my products or my RPG Pundit Presents short product series, and by the end of tonight, you're going to be hearing about another new thing that I'm going to be doing that will also be an opportunity for you to join and show your support. But I'm not there yet. So let me finish checking out the other stuff to be said here. L says Vampire was made to get nerds laid. Prove me wrong. Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I guess it was done to like as a trap to attract goth girls to places where nerds are, but how much that actually translated into nerds getting actually laid, I'm not totally sure. Critical Role is a bit like the play, the importance of being earnest. It's like after you've seen it a couple of times, you're done with it. Okay, so Reziel says, Pundit, what supplements would you use for BX1E gaming in an ancient setting? Greco-Roman, Babylonian, etc. History books are okay, but I'd like OSR. And he gave a $5 super chat. Well, thank you very much. That's a tough call. I mean, I don't think that there is. Is anybody aware of there being a Greco-Roman? I mean, there's mazes and minotaurs, right? Like that. That's technically pre-OSR, but it's actually like one of the proto-OSR games. It was a big influence on the early OSR movement. It's like basically, what if Dungeons and Dragons had been based on Greek myths rather than on like Western medieval myth, right? So that could be actually one thing that you could use. It's not, and this isn't OSR, but like there's the Glory of Rome thing from the old GURPS source book, which is quite a good one. Yeah, I think those are the ones that come to mind immediately. Servants of Gaius is not even D&D based, but it's a very good product by Bedrock. Okay, we've got a $10 super chat here. It says, how many cups of coffee is this to you? Not much over one for me. Oh, are you asking like, so Wayne Brack just gave me a $10 super chat. I think he's asking how many cups of coffee can I buy for $10 in Uruguay? No, nowadays, I guess a typical, like, let's say you're getting a cortado in my corner restaurant, which happens to be a really good restaurant because I'm in a very good area for like pubs and stuff. So there, a cortado I think is about $2.50. so I guess that would be like 4 coffees for me if you gave a $10 super chat. But I mean, it depends because like if I was to go to like Starbucks, right, you're in Uruguay, there it would be, let's see, 300. So like there, an iced macchiato venti, I think it is, would be like $7.50. So it wouldn't be that as much, right? So it does depend a little bit. Okay, so now we've got another super chat there that I just missed. So I think Hollow World for D&D, is that what it said? Yeah, Hollow World for D&D, says Michael McLaughlin for $2. Hey, thank you for that. Well, thank you for everyone who's doing the super chat thing. I'll have to see later if I'm guessing that the money will be there in the account, right? Like if they wouldn't have activated if it wasn't something that could work, right? Really great. This is exciting. But again, feel free to check out my products. Okay, let me keep scrolling ahead quick here, so we can get to my comment on a certain video that came out recently, and then my announcement. Diversity and Dragon says, Radiant Citadel had 5 adventures in a row which featured games and festivals. I still have PTSD over that. Well, it was a horrible game written by people that don't actually know anything about D&D, so what do you expect? Reziel says, a lot of people that give 0 Fs about D&D are all over Baldur's Gate 3 right now, big for streaming. Diversity and Dragon says coffee and communism. D&D, but the Radiant Citadel have baristas and proms. Calvinoni says bear sex with bears. Yeah, that was the first thing I ever heard about Baldur's Gate 3 was the bear thing, so kind of weird. Jonathan Klinker says, WotC being incompetent, who would have guessed? Griffin Morgan says, scenario 5. You realize the artwork hanging in your coffee shop is exploitative of someone, but you have no idea who. How do you feel? Yeah, like that's going to be in the next D&D book probably. In the Giants source book. I mean, they're already going to do they're going to do one on the Deck of Many Things, where they're going to they're going to retroactively retcon. That's it. They're going to retcon the Book of Many Things as having been invented by a autistic female paladin and her Medusa girlfriend for reasons, why would a paladin make the Deck of Many, the Deck of Many Things is a cursed item. It's actually an example of a good cursed item, right? It doesn't make any sense that you would have a paladin do. Unless she's like a paladin of wacky chaos of, oh my god, so random, right? A magical pixie paladin or something, which is completely possible in this version of D&D because you can literally be a paladin who believes in whatever. You can be a paladin who really likes popcorn, and so you're a paladin of popcorn. That's the way. It's no longer that you are a warrior for God. No. Anyways, I think this era is coming to an end, right? I think the VTT will mean that the nature of the products Wizards puts out will change, and it'll be a lot less of this woke nonsense. I think that they're looking for an excuse to do this. The writer's strike was a godsend to the TV and movie industries because they're going to be able to fire a whole bunch of people that otherwise they would have been canceled for firing. But now they can say, well, we got to let you go. Writer's strike. Sorry. So they're going to get rid of all of this stuff that they realize are weights on their necks, right? Jeffrey Garrison says Civil War is already an RPG. You can be a corps commander and role-playing pushing brigades around. Okay. Will Anir says an authentic Civil War would be depressing if it was hysterical Andersonville. I don't know. And me? I don't know what I think what that last word might have been a typo. Ironcaster says Deadlands was that RPG. Well, Deadlands wasn't, because Deadlands was meant to be in the Wild West, but it's an alt history, and it's a really stupid version of alt history. Ironcaster said people are upset that the Confederacy was in the game. Well, I'm always upset by alternate histories that say, well, the Civil War never ended, right? Or the Civil War ended and the Confederacy won. And then here's the Wild West, and it's still just like the Wild West. Because that means that you don't understand the historical process. The Wild West was the Civil War Part 2. It never would have happened. The expansion of the Wild West would never have looked the way it did in a scenario where the South won the Civil War, or where the Civil War just doesn't stop, right? The westward expansion was not going to keep happening while there was a Civil War on. And if the Civil War had been won by the Confederacy, then you would, westward expansion would have looked totally different. It might be very interesting, but it would have to be completely different. It would have almost none of the themes of the things we associate with the Wild West, right? So much of the conflicts of the Wild West, like the OK Corral was a shootout between Southern Democrats and Northern Republicans, fundamentally, right? This was still the war, the Civil War. It was just the Civil War continuing to be fought, right? It was the rebels who had lost the Civil War, then went west to try to escape the boot of the industrialist Yankee, and then the industrialist Yankee kept following them, right? And so then they ended up inevitably getting into conflicts. And all the conflicts of the Wild West were in certain ways extension of that same fundamental conflict that never got really fully resolved, right? Not to to say nothing of a whole bunch of other elements that come in there too, but that are all kind of tied to this same mass conflict between this idea of centralization versus local interest, and the idea of progress versus tradition and freedom and things like that. You know, like, and so like all of this stuff is wrapped up in it. You can't have a Wild West if the Confederacy doesn't lose the Civil War. Well, at least it wouldn't have been that Wild West. You know, it would have looked very, very, very different. Let's see here. Eric says, yeah, have you ever checked out Deadlands? Yeah, I mean, I ran a Deadlands game in the 90s. But I was, even then, I wasn't too happy with it. You know, I wasn't quite as studious at the time, but of the subject. But even then, I thought, well, it's still really stupid. Like this idea that, oh, you know, the Confederacy is still fighting the Civil War, but now they're not racist anymore, so you can play one. You know, like it seemed really dumb. Diversity Drive says, LOL, pundit the Luddite. Well, I am a bit of a Luddite. Keon Cobra says, Weird Frontiers is a great Western-themed RPG based off DCC RPG. Great game. I'm not familiar with that one. That sounds very interesting. I hope the creator sends me a review book. Space Who said, Hail Pundit, what's the ETA on the Heroes and Villains book? Well, I don't know, but I believe it's last time I spoke to Mad Scribe, who I guess isn't here right now. Sometimes he shows up to these. I think it's going to be coming out theoretically within the next month, which means it'll probably come out somewhere between this month and the next 2 months. Like that's you got to give some leeway there. Rekal says it's eerie to discover that Pundit isn't Daniel Day-Lewis. Here for the night, $5 super chat says, where to buy your books that you gained the most benefit? Well, okay, so technically, the best profit margin for me is usually on drive-through, by a slight margin though for most of those books, right? Like for the books, any of the books other than Spectre Press. At Spectre Press, you can only buy the stuff from drive-through, so it's got an exclusive deal, so that means that gives me a good profit. But those ones you can't buy anywhere else. In the others, you know, like most of my other publishers, you can get either on drive-through or Amazon, and in some cases on Lulu, like for example, Dark Albion is available on Lulu. And in those cases, there's a very slight advantage to drive-through, but it's slight. So like if you really, like if you don't want to buy it through drive-through, or you can't buy it through drive-through, or it's more convenient to get it through Amazon, you can get it through Amazon. In every case, as long as it's from like the official publisher, I'm going to be getting profit from it, you know. But thank you for asking that. Let's see here. Diversity Drive says money does go to the same account as ads. Okay, great. YouTube will take 30%. Okay, yeah, I figured. What about an RPG on Vietnam? Says Jonathan Clinker. Yeah, well, I guess maybe at this point that could be a good choice. Although I don't know. I mean, it would be kind of a drudgery type of game, wouldn't it? The Vietnam War, just like the Iraq War, it was a demoralizing war in more than one sense, right? Let's put it that way. There was nothing heroic about those wars, you know. Any plans for new content for conventional Lion and Dragon, says Joseph Kuznell. Well, I mean, Sword and Caravan is a setting for Lion and Dragon. If by conventional Lion and Dragon you mean like stuff set in England, then yes, eventually there's going to be more of that stuff. There's some stuff that will be coming out relatively shortly, and there's some stuff that will be coming out, you know, later on. But there is going to be more of that. I don't know if that's what you meant, but I'm guessing that's what you mean. And yeah, I haven't given up on setting it in on stuff set in England. But there is going to be more stuff there. let's see here. I think I keep getting further behind on these comments, so I'm gonna just keep zipping along here. I'm gonna skip stuff. I'm sorry, guys. Jeffrey Garrison says Venger has a random table he uses to generate random tables. That's great. Who said that? L says, did Pundit just use coherent and Venger in the same sentence? Raziel says, the Kybalion is a great core principles book as well. Well, I would disagree with you there. The Kybalion is presented as if it's a book of ancient knowledge that was like rediscovered. It's not. It was a book written by 3 New Age authors in the early 1900s. And a lot of what it collects is more to do with like a mixture of Victorian Spiritism and Theosophy than anything that was genuine Hermetic philosophy, right? You want to be very wary about that because it talks about stuff like the law of attraction and all this stuff that has nothing to do with how the Hermetics, the actual, like, the Greco-Roman Hermetics did things or how the medieval Hermetics did things. So, sorry, but no. Jonathan Clinker says, have any good sources for medieval magic? Well, you can look at the grimoires, right? There are some books, I don't remember the titles, but there have been some very good overview books that like do analysis of all the different medieval grimoires of the grimoire tradition, that like they don't have the text, but they talk about the history of them, they explain them, where they came from, how they were developed over time. But I don't remember, I'm sorry, I don't remember the title now. Crapphone says, Pundit is a Horatio Alger wannabe rags to rags. Well, no, I was actually more like from well-to-do to penniless hippie to, or, well, I don't know if I was ever exactly a hippie, but something like that. Counterculture guy, anyway. To self-made man, like that is living comfortably, but not. I wouldn't say it's riches. Comments on the Argentinian primaries. Well, the only thing is that every night I pray for the well-being of Javier Milei. Like that's Argentina's only a great chance. Pundit, how you doing? Hope you're good. Thank you, Nosarian. Pundit, confirm or deny you are the older brother of Arch Warhammer? I don't even know who Arch Warhammer is. So I'm assuming I'm not the older brother because I do have a younger brother. For all I know, maybe he's got a Warhammer YouTube and just never told me. Tony Valenti says Pundit wears a scarf. That's all I need to know. I'm not sure what that means, but okay. Nosarian says Canada is the limbo of the US. I am way, way, way behind on the chat. So I'm trying to speed up here. Cthulhu Invictus, that's not OSR though. I guess that's for recommendations for Roman games. Yeah, I forgot about that one. Sorry, guys. Wayne Brack says Vecna was trans. Well, that'll be the next retcon that Wizards does, right? Jeffrey Garrison, chaotic evil wizard. I identify as a paladin, you racist. That's great. Rekal says the Picatrix books are a staple of medieval Renaissance magic. Yeah, well, the Picatrix is one of the oldest grimoires to enter into the Middle East, and it was actually into the medieval world. It was actually derived from the translation of a Middle Eastern Arab grimoire of magic. So it was like kind of the one that started it all. very early on in like, well, in the early medieval period. Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't even have alignment, says Rafael Andrade. Jack TH71 says, the wife loves the pipe and says, hello, pal. Well, thank you very much. Where are we now? Shoot. Okay. Here we go. Michael McLaughlin says a lot of those gunslingers were Civil War soldiers looking to cause trouble out west. Yeah, well, exactly. That was one of the big deals. They were that, or they were the younger brothers of the Civil War soldiers that suddenly found themselves with no prospects. You know. Eric C says Pundit is too knowledgeable for his own good. All the facts in his brain ruin so many settings for him. Well, only when you're talking about history or alternate history, right? And alternate history is usually okay. Like I can accept it if it's, if it's plausible, like this could have happened, or sometimes if it like goes just so way out into nonsense that it doesn't really matter, right? Like it goes beyond the need for suspension of disbelief, right? But where it really pisses me off is where they do something that just is very clearly being done for some other reason, and that it doesn't provide a credible reality. It shows a lack of understanding of the sequential nature of history, right? Like it says that, well, if the Confederacy and the Union were still fighting the Civil War, the Wild West would still have happened at the same. No, it wouldn't have. That's not how it works. I hate stupidly thought out projects. That applies to almost any setting, really. Like if there's stuff that you look at and go like, well, why the hell is this? How the hell could this be like this, right? Like, why isn't this kingdom devouring all the others, or why are these two kingdoms at war with each other? How have they done that, right? Like, or whatever, all that sort of stuff. Bad design. It's bad design. Tony Valenti says the Civil War was the Republicans in the North versus Democrats in the South and Democrats in the North. Yeah, no, you're quite right about that. Of course, the majority of Northern Democrats did not want the war to happen. I hope you didn't think that I implied otherwise. Let's see here. I think I'm finally catching up. Raziel says, fair enough about the Kybalion pundit is Israel Regardier, less corrupted, so to speak. Well, Israel Regardier is a commentator and collector of knowledge related to the Hermetic magic of the 19th century, right? The Golden Dawn. He was connected to both the Golden Dawn and to Aleister Crowley, right? So he was a writer on the subject of modern Western magic. He didn't pretend that it was ancient Western magic, right? Like that's the real problem with the Kybalion. The Kybalion is actually a New Age book. It's not a Western Hermetic book. It's a book of New Age philosophy as of like around 1910. But it pretends that it's this ancient book written by, the ancient Hermetic mystery school, when it wasn't. It was, like a lot of people make that mistake. They think it's an ancient grimoire or something, and it's definitely not that. Chatelet says, Pundit and L&D have a background table. How do you recognize having characters in a background in a game where they can easily die? How do you prevent players from becoming apathetic towards it? Well, the background table is meant to provide some kind of a tiny element of like previous history to your character that gives them a touch of flair, and sometimes some kind of mechanical issue, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. Most of them don't give any mechanical issue, they just give a flavor detail. But there's a little bit of each, so it's a kind of a lucky roll sort of thing. And you can really run with some of them, right? Like, so there's one that is like when you were kidnapped by elves as a kid. So that can become like a major feature of your entire life, right? And there's some that's like, oh, you were involved in a forbidden romance or whatever, and you could do as much or as little of that as you want. Or your family was disinherited, stuff like that. But that's done actually as a way to give the player a choice of something they can add to develop their character. Like the question you're really asking, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. What you're saying is, in any game where there's a high risk of lethality, what's the point of playing a character? That doesn't change. There's a high risk. And that's like saying in the real world, well, that there's a very good chance you'll probably die before you turn 100 years old. So like, why do anything at all? Like that's what you're asking there. What you should actually be asking is like, what is the benefit of that in a context of a game that is more lethal than certain point buy games or games where your characters start with a higher power level? And so like the answer to that is that the table is really fast. The reason I put the random background rule is to say you don't get to write a 50-page background. You roll. You don't get to decide even what events happened to you in your past. You roll and this is what happened. And then you have to figure out what to make of that instead of trying to create this kind of Mary Sue character, this like projection of yourself as the ideal or something. That's a really bad problem, a really big issue there, and it's very weird how you start to see a lot more commentary in like 5th edition era of I've been looking at some of these videos on YouTube about like 5th edition character creation and stuff on Twitter, and the assumption seems to be now for a lot of these people that your D&D character should be the extension of the self you always wanted to be, right? Which is just insane. That's crazy talk, right? Like a D&D character is supposed to be an opportunity for you to be something you're not for you to be the version of you that you always wanted to be, right? So that's where you get all these, teenage girls wanting to play, what is it, non-binary tiefling sorceresses or whatever. Like this, all of these weirdo furry races and all this stuff is like because they're seeing it as like part of this process of like individualized self-expression and transhumanist queering of youth and things like that. Like it's so weird. It's just so weird. What does Meatball think about Argentine politics? Meatball doesn't care for South Americans in general, I believe. I think that's her policy. She doesn't realize she is one, but the answer says the tobacco is anomalous. Okay. I've never heard of that. Half Catarini, half red Virginian, and you'll have the bird on it. I've never tried one. I'm not even familiar with it at all. I guess that sounds like it could be good. Wandering Main says we need to make a video guide on grimoires and medieval magic, given that's what many people are asking about. Well, look at the old school companion one, and there's like I've got the whole collection of all the grimoires that I've done, like because I did several RPG Pundit issues about grimoires, right? So look at that. That's all you're going to need for running a game. If you want to learn about grimoires, then go look up. There's a ton of occult channels that talk about grimoire magic nowadays. If I wanted to do that, I'd have an occult channel. Knowing geopolitics, not world news, helps with world building. Okay. Gonna keep going here. Chicken Tabitha Cicero. I know about that. Now Chick Cicero passed away for sure by now, right? Hasn't he? I hope I'm not wrong about that. Well, it's not that I want him dead, but I mean, hope I don't end up mistakenly believing that. But yeah, I'm familiar with them. Will in New Haven says, do you really find those grimoires interesting compared to the fighting manuals of the period? Yes, I do. Yeah, grimoires are fascinating. Yeah, that's right. The Chicken Tabitha Cicero did the self-initiation to the Golden Dawn, which is just ridiculous. The Golden Dawn doesn't exist anymore. It's like the Rosicrucian movement. It was a thing that existed at one point, and then it died. And anyone claiming their Golden Dawn now is just nonsense. Just like anyone claiming they're Rosicrucian is nonsense. Jeffrey Garrison, mommy pundit just made fun of my weirdo, funny furry race character. L says, but pundit, autistic Mackenzie de Armas can't see herself as a hero because how many Chinese Mexican autistics have been heroes throughout history? There's no representation for her. Yeah. Sticks, Hex, and Hammer used to do occult videos. That's true. Mackenzie to all right, let's go. All right. We're finally up. I'm finally caught up. So now I'm going to switch to my first topic, which I think will be brief, but I don't know. I might end up ranting a bit, and then then it won't be brief. But in short, several of you have informed me that the Basic Expert has gone and done a hate video about me. So here's the thing, right? Like the Basic Expert has been doing a lot of taking advantage of this argument I had with him about hosting Jeffro Johnson on his channel without asking him about the rampant anti-Semitism in the Bro-SR movement. And in fact, by treating the Bro-SR as if it's part of the OSR and not an anti-OSR cult, right? And he just can't quit. So he went on to a podcast and was talking about that with Ryan Howard of all people, Jesus. And then when I commented on it at the start of my last video, he decided to do this video of me, which is very much a kind of a hate video. And in it, I really wouldn't have cared. Like he shows footage of me practicing Qigong, which is on I have there's another channel that I have, which is for my, talking about mysticism and spirituality. And, there's a video of me on my roof practicing Qigong, and he decided to cut that and put it in there and whatever. And, I guess he was thinking it's kind of like doxing me or something, but honestly, that doesn't, I don't really care. There is nothing that concerns me about that. I can see how it could look silly, right? Qigong, it's not, first of all, I wasn't doing Tai Chi or martial arts there. I was doing Qigong, which is an internal practice, kind of internal alchemy. The exercises look kind of similar to Tai Chi moves. They're both from the same source. And of course, if you're doing that, somebody who sees that going on doesn't understand the context of it, we'll look at it and say, well, yeah, that looks kind of funny, right? And sure, it looks funny. It looks like I'm doing some kind of weird Tai Chi. And then he added this kind of goofy music that was not obviously the original video. And then he superimposed that with screenshots of tweets from the argument that we had on Twitter, which he tried to put on there as if to show, look at how much Pundit was harassing me, when in fact, it was very clearly a two-side thing. And he tried to selectively cut it, but he did a really bad job of it, in fact, because he went and included in those images, that curated image of him, something that actually proved that he was lying in the video itself. In the video, he's saying that, I demanded that he cancel Jeffro, or that I wanted to have him canceled or something, or that I've been telling people not to watch his channel, and I've been trying to gatekeep about who you're allowed to see, right? And all of that is bullshit. And literally during the argument on Twitter, there were multiple times when he claimed that, and then I had to respond. I'm not saying, nobody is saying that you can't interview Jeffro Johnson. Nobody is saying that you need to cancel him or that you should be canceled. What I am saying is that if you interview him, you have to have the responsibility as an interviewer to provide an honest perspective of who he is and what he does, right? Like the fact is that instead what he did was just this huge, what would you call it? He glorified, it was an infomercial for him, right? He did basically an enormous an enormous mutual appreciation session with him about how wonderful him and his movement are. He ignored the fact that his movement essentially tells people not to be in the OSR, right? It says you shouldn't play anything except AD&D rules as written. And he completely ignored the fact that his movement is rife with anti-Semites. And you know what? The second after the Basic Expert put out that video, I suddenly started to get a whole bunch of anti-Semitic comments on my comments of my YouTube videos that I've been erasing, right? But I mean, it's no surprise. The Basic Expert claims that he's sick about this and it's just horrible and everything, right? And then he goes, and this is the only reason I end up bringing this up. He calls me a grifter, okay? So a grifter is someone who uses deceptive techniques to try to get money out of you for where you will not get exactly what is being sold, right? Like, so, a snake oil salesman is a grifter, right? Now, if he had called me a shameless self-promoter, I probably wouldn't even be bringing it up right now because I couldn't care less. I don't actually want more people to go watch his stupid video, right? But he called me a grifter, which is really funny because this is the guy who is saying, "Oh, the pundit keeps persecuting me. Why does he keep persecuting me? I just go on to these podcasts and talk about how much the pundit is persecuting me, and then he comes back and says something, and so he's persecuting me. And, I don't want to talk about it, but here's a whole video I'm putting on, and it's my brand, man, my brand. I got to look out for my brand, right? And take a look at his channel. You will see that his pundit video has got twice as many views as the last two videos that he did, more than twice the views as the last two videos. And it's the most views he's gotten in a month for any kind of video. He does, the problem is that for a guy that's so obsessed with his brand, the Basic Expert, he's not doing badly. He's got, about half as many subscribers as I do, and he probably got that in less time than me. Of course, it's an easier market to do it. But he doesn't get a lot of views, and so he is concerned about his brand. I understand. He's told me that many times, right? About the brand is so, and how dare I get in the way of his brand by suggesting that instead of trying to court this cult of right-wing lunatics to get the 30 or 40 subs that will get him, he should actually dare to question, here's something. Ryan David, new co-host on Inappropriate Characters. In the last live stream that I did, I had Ryan on here and I interviewed him. And this is a guy who's going to be my co-host on Inappropriate Characters, right? And I asked him live on air several fairly tough questions about stuff around him, issues, claims people have made. I did not give him those questions beforehand. I did warn him, I'm going to ask tough questions. He was like, oh, yeah, okay, sure. Right. And, but I didn't tell him what those questions were. He didn't have time to curate them. They weren't questions I'd asked him before. There's stuff I brought up right there in the interview, because that's the responsibility of the interviewer, is to actually, not just allow the other person a soapbox, but rather to get to the heart of whatever the issues are around a person. And this was my literal co-host. And I think Ryan answered those questions really well. He did a very good job of it. But I had to ask them, right? And maybe he wouldn't have made a good job of it. And it would have been somewhat scandalous, and that could have been a problem. But you need to stand up and do that, right? So and you can't be afraid of losing subs to the point that you don't do the right thing, But here, what I think what the Basic Expert has found out is that the Bro SR market, like the number of sub growth that he gets there and views he's going to get from those guys, is nice because they're really, dedicated to supporting anyone that continues to support their despicable ideas. But it's a very small group. And he's also discovered that every time he complains about how I'm mean to him in a video, he gets way more views, right? So suddenly his brand is about this. You want to talk about being a grifter, right? Here's a guy who is crying about how he doesn't want to have to fight with the pundit, doing a video where he gets clips from a relatively obscure, completely free and not relevant channel of mine, and puts that up, and he carefully curates it. He does it like that, you know, because if I was a grifter, I'm sure I'd have a much slicker production, right? This is just me talking in front of a camera. That's all I ever do. Or usually I'm behind the camera and my book is in front of the camera. Sometimes my cat is in front of the camera, but I never put her there, right? This is zero. There's zero production value here. There's zero element of propaganda here, right? Whereas the basic expert does this whole video montage, which is meant to be in some way to attack me or to ridicule me. Though I don't feel particularly ridiculed, and I recognize that it's an attack. It's just not an effective one. But he's doing all that because he knows he's going to get the views. He's realized that's what helps his brand. So he is the grifter. The grifter is the person that lies to you, that tells you one thing and actually means the other, right? That he's selling you on one thing, on this idea that he's the man of principles. But in fact, he's doing it for the views because the brand is what's important to him. He said that to me during the fight. You know, he said, how dare you question me asking anything, you know, not asking these questions of Jeffro Johnson. You're going to hurt my brand, man. You know, and that's the moment that I knew that this is not a good solution to anything, you know. So that's it. That's pretty much all I have to say on that. I know that a lot of you probably don't want to hear that. Now, what I will say also, he keeps saying in the comments to that video, because I took a look at them. He says, the pundit will tell you that you shouldn't watch me, but you know, I'm not saying that. Well, you know, I've never said that. I've said it over and over again, and you guys have seen me on videos, on live stream saying, you know, the basic experts, his grifting aside. The Basic Experts channel has been an interesting channel in many occasions, and I don't expect I don't want anyone to be canceled. What I want is everybody to be approached with an honest perspective, and that means, you know, making people own up to their shit, right? Like in some ways, if you compare Jeffro Johnson and Bart Vikernes, you know, Vikernes is pretty despicable, but at least he's honest. Like he'll actually stand there and say it, right? And apparently, I've heard now that Johnson's publisher doesn't allow him to talk about his anti-Semitic comments, you know. So like that's really interesting. I heard that apparently from the comments in this Basic Expert video. So, you know, I'm trying to wonder which publisher it is. Is that Castalia House, the publisher of his Appendix N book, that is actually the publishing house owned by notorious, you know, racial supremacist Vox Day, you know, like by another group of absolute anti-Semites, you know, like that are, you know, this whole neo-Nazi movement or whatever, they were the people that embraced Jeffro right from the beginning, you know. Vox Day is probably best known as the guy who did like the rabbit puppies as opposed to the sad puppies during the Hugo Awards scandals and all that, you know, which basically was, again, an enormous grifting job for Vox Day that ended up being counterproductive to the effort of the original Sad Puppies movie that he just decided to rip off, because those guys were just like neutral, and what he wants is extreme, right? But like, ask yourself, do you want the OSR to be a bunch of let's not even say racist stuff, right? Like, let's say, do you want the OSR to be a bunch of right-wing propaganda? Is that what you want? Every one of your games to be politicized towards the right, even if you're a Trump voter, right? Like if you support the conservatives, I'm a conservative guy, right? In terms of my alignment, right? I like Trump, I like DeSantis, you know, I hate that they're fighting each other, but you know, in an ideal world, they'd be you know, connected. I even think Vivek is cool, you know, but I don't want my RPGs to be a bunch of right-wing propaganda disguised as an RPG, right? I definitely don't want them being a bunch of left-wing propaganda, which is what a lot of them are today, disguised as RPGs. The point is, I want my games to be games, right? And as soon as you've got like this added political motive to any gaming movement, then that is not making gaming any better. It's not what it is it's trying to impose a political agenda so that people who are more into the politics than the game can come in and occupy that space, right? And, you know, even if you think, oh, because I know a lot of you guys seem to think, oh, well, you know, this is different because you're not fighting the SJWs here. Why are you fighting your friends, right? Like these people are not my friends. They have the same agenda of wanting to come in and wreck the hobby in order to impose their personal political agenda. And as it happens, this political agenda is collectivist, which means it's not, the conservatism I believe in is a conservatism that is based on individual merit, right? On judging a person for themselves, not for their group, right? So as soon as you have that, it's just race communism, right? That's all it is. That kind of racial nationalism is race communism. That's why they call themselves National Socialists, right? It's always going to actually be a collectivist. A collectivist movement is always, by definition, going to be a leftist movement. It might have conservative tones in its morality, but that doesn't make it conservative. All right. Let's see some comments here. Noijiat says, the Vietnam War had the best soundtrack. Well, yeah, it sort of did. You've got a point there. I'll give you that one. Let's see. I've got it behind there. Let me go a little bit ahead here. I seem to have scrolled back too far. Where was that? Jerry Harris says you could double the number of viewers if you just follow Meatball around with your camera instead of putting it on yourself. Yeah, I know, but it's hard to follow her sometimes. Right now it isn't because she's just she's under me. Okay, she's I've got like a little blanket on here, and she's crawled in under the blanket next to my foot, and I didn't realize that until I tried to pull up my when I turned to try to see where she used to be. Now she's snuck in and she's like literally sleeping at my feet. It's very cute. Angela says, "Oh no, basic expert fight again." Yeah, well, it's not as useful for me. But I'm not going to lie to you about anything. I don't mind a good fight, right? If this asshole wants to keep talking about me, that's fine. I mean, I'm happy to encourage newer gamers and help them get more views, right? Newer gamers who want to have YouTube channels. So if that's the way he wants to go about it, then fine. The point is, don't lie about it and pretend that you're all shook up about it and that you hate making this video that is going to double the views of your usual videos that don't get as many views. Let's see. Ryan David says, bottom line, someone was running light on content and engagement in the run-up to a Kickstarter for a Mastika clone. He needed a shot of engagement and controversy. Largely, I agree with you, Ryan. I don't know if it's necessarily fair for his book to be called a Mastika clone. I think that it looks to me like he's done a good amount of research. I want to be very fair about these things, especially when it comes to like the products, I've still got a review copy that I've, it's not next, it's the one after in the queue of my review videos for his Atomic Punk game. And I'm going to try to do as fair a review as I possibly can of that product. Yeah. But aside from you calling it a Mastika clone, yeah, maybe you've got something of a point there. He needed to up his views. And so he knows that anytime someone mentions the RPG Pundit, they get more views, right? Anytime the RPG Pundit mentions you, you get more views. That's how it works. That is the power of the pundit. Keon Cobra says, how do you start at playing AD&D Raw and somehow arrive at anti-Semitism? I'll give you a hint. It was the other way around. It started with the anti-Semitism and ends up with figuring out what gimmick you can use to sell the anti-Semitism, right? Or not to sell the anti-Semitism, but to allow an entryism into somebody's social space where suddenly it'll help normalize anti-Semitism there. That's the issue, right? Like, it's not like if there's a bunch of neo-Nazis on roller skates, it's not because they love roller skating. It's because they're trying to figure out a way to get in and recruit people in the roller skating community, to join them and to have a safe space for them to express their beliefs on race in the roller skating community. And it's the same thing in the gaming community. And we see this on the left all the time, right? It's just the right wing are not as good at doing it, right? The left does it constantly, and they do it with enormous levels of skill where they manage to quickly take a centralized control of a thing, like comics or well, they tried that with most art. I mean, they've taken control of D&D, for example, and then they can put these racist agendas. I mean, they literally did a book that has now won a number of prizes and also been the worst-selling book, worst-selling adventure book that Wizards ever made, called The Radiant Citadel, where their active advertising point of it was no white people were involved in this product, right? And so it was a fundamentally racist product. It was intentionally excluding one specific skin color, and they get away with it, right? Because they're on the left, but it's because they're smarter. They're both despicable, but left-wing racists are somehow smarter than right-wing racists, who are really the bottom of the barrel and end up just not being very good at doing anything. Al says, pundit, replying on Twitter is harassment? Yeah, exactly. Let's see what else here. Jeffrey Garrison says the TBE pundit rivalry is the best thing since Arnis and Gygax's championship cage battle. Keon Cover says grifter is a buzzword. It translates as a cheap attempt at faux moral authority. Well, no, that's not really. I mean, like, I don't think that's not the usual definition of a grifter. A grifter is a guy, like, if you get some guy who is like, oh, hey, I'm super progressive and a male feminist, so please buy my comic book, right, or something like that, right? Trying to appeal to, and then you find out he's not actually a super progressive male feminist, or whatever. That's one example of a grifter. It's somebody who's putting on a false selling point, like the basic expert acting as though he doesn't want to do a really detailed edited video. Like, he had to do overlays, he had to do all this shit that I have no idea how to do, for starters, but that I would never bother to do about him. I just use my words, right? But he had to do this whole, high-tech production of this video in the hopes that it would generate him more views, but he was pretending like this was a terrible, that he didn't want to have anything to do with this, right? So, like, that is a grifter. A grifter is a guy that's telling you one thing while he does another, or that does one thing while he tells you another. Jerry Harris says, how does Qigong fit into D&D? Did I miss a section of that in the DMG? No, you didn't. But you know where you can find Qigong? It is one of the things that you can find in the Invisible College RPG. It's one of the techniques of magic. Qigong has become very popular among Western occultists, in that it's a form of internal cultivation that is like internal alchemy. The thing is, there's a lot of stuff in the West, in Western magic, that was lost over time, and so we know that there were a lot of spiritual practices tied to medieval Western magic and ancient Western magic that have been partly lost, or that nowadays seem to not fit, like that require that you have a really devout Christianity that a lot of occultists don't have, right? So, there are some occultists that looked for alternatives starting from the 19th century onwards in, like, Indian and Chinese sources. That's how yoga came to the West originally. And it's actually also how Buddhism came to the West. One of the earliest Buddhist converts from the West was a guy who's also a major guy in the Golden Dawn. And so that they brought these things in as substitute for, like, some of the training techniques that were probably never written down, like the way the rituals of the grimoires are written down, and that have to be there to, like, replace it, right? Like, anyway. L says, reminder, I'm assuming that's the basic expert's name. Don't know if he's public about that, so I'm not going to repeat it out loud. Began TTRPGs with 4E, but he's a young splainer that will tell older players that were playing D&D wrong before he was born. Raziel says, my truth, it hurts. Dr. Satterberry says, I remember when you had sub 1K pundit, I was there at the ground level. Yeah, and I thank everybody who's been there since the beginning. And now I've got like 7,000 guys, right? But, the interesting thing is watching the views compared to your subs. And of course, eventually you're going to have a lot more subs than you have views of any video, as a rule. there was a period there when I was at around 3,000 subs. Actually, that was when I was getting videos that were equal to or sometimes over the number of subs I had. So I was getting more views than I had subs yet at the time, right? So just so that you can compare that to the Basic Expert, who has like about 3,000 subs now, but his average views are like about 400, 500 views in a video, right? They're quite low. So I guess he felt like he really needed the assistance on this from invoking the power of the pundit to get himself some views in that video. So, well, I'm glad I could help him, I guess. Kian Cobra says, that said, he has some good takes on OSR stuff. No, I mean, he has had some good takes on OSR stuff. I was a fan until he decided that he was going to just, you know, spend an hour giving Jeffro an erotic massage, you know, like. Let's see, where are we here? Someone says, I think your cat counts as a major special effect to draw in an audience. Are you or are you not a cat cuteness exploiter? Well, listen, I do not ever, almost ever, sorry, when I'm doing a short, sometimes, like when I'm doing one of my shorts to comment on something, then I'll just be like literally following Meatball and filming her. But even then, I'm just filming her being herself, right? But other than that, I never grab my cat and make her come to where I'm filming. I never have like something to entice her to come. She'll show up sometimes because she gets curious about what I'm doing and then wants to hang out. Like she always kind of wants to hang out around me, right? Which is very nice. It's one of the wonderful qualities she has. But I never force her to be in a video. That's why there are some videos where she isn't there. It's because she comes and goes as she pleases, right? I'm not, you know, like some people say that their cats are like their child, or that they are their cat's servant, or like that's not the relationship. Neither of those are the relationship I have with my cat. Me and my cat are kind of equals. She's, I guess the closest thing I would say is she's a roommate, right? Like, and I like her a lot. You know, I love her actually, but I'm not. I don't see it as a situation where I'm going to like. I don't dress her up in stuff. You know, like Bill the Elf from my DCC game, who also has the channel that shows my DCC stuff. He has a dog, this French bulldog named Benito, very sweet dog. Named him after a certain Italian politician, and he dresses up his dog, right? He does little pictures with his dog, of his dog in little outfits, right? Which is really funny because before he got the dog, he hated pets, right? He never wanted to have a pet. And he didn't, you know, he didn't believe in any of that stuff. And he would always make fun of like the people, usually women, who will dress up their dogs and those laugh at those poor dogs. And now he does that, right? And I've never done that with my pets. It's, to me, like, you know, I see a different type. It's an alien consciousness, but it's a different type of consciousness. And so I have like this respect relationship with my cat, right? Like I don't see her as a child or as property exactly, but I also, you know, I'm not also her servant or something. I don't my whole life doesn't circle around her either. Right? But so she comes and goes as she likes. Elle says, how many last time I talk about pundit videos is to Basic Expert going to make? I guess as many as it takes for him to get to the next tier of his brand development. You know, this is the problem of being an influencer. I actually want to really encourage the Basic Expert to get this book out. I hope it does really well. The Aztec book, Maquatl, I think it's called, and for him to start doing more books. Because maybe if he ends up doing well at writing RPG books, he'll start to think like a game designer rather than an influencer, and that might improve him. You know, like it would be good if that would happen. Elle says, I want the Basic Expert to get a job with Justin Lanasa. No, I don't think so. Warp and Anvil says, criticizing Jews does not make one a racial supremacist. You are correct. Criticizing individual Jews does not. criticizing the politics of Israel does not. You know, if you criticize George Soros, it doesn't mean you're an anti-Semite, right? But when you say something and then categorize it as representative of all Jews, or suggest that people are doing evil things because of Jewishness, then yes, that makes you an anti-Semite. And that was what Jeffro does, right? So that makes him an anti-Semite. Drew Ender says, longtime viewer, first time catching on a live stream, missed at least the last 3K subscriber streams. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Drew, but I'm glad you caught up to us now. I'm doing more, you know, I was briefly permanently banned forever from Twitter, and then I got better after about 10 days. Did some magic there. Since then, I've been committing to putting more content on YouTube. So I'm doing streams more often now. Reziel says, Vivek, baby. L says, Jeffro blamed the problems with D&D on a cabal of Jews. He claimed that the Hasbro, you know, that they were Jewish and that this is somehow, you know, it's just stupid stuff, right? Cal Benoni says, oh, well, I'll just continue watching who I want to. Well, you know, again, I'm actually not telling you not to watch anything. Like, I'm not saying don't watch something. I was saying to him, don't do a pussyfooting interview, right? Like, you have to, if you're going to interview him, you have to challenge him. You know, like, we challenge, the problem is, of course, he wanted the 40 subs. He wanted the, whatever, 25 to 40 people that follow Jeffro to subscribe to his channel. And he knew that if he was mean to Jeffro, they might not subscribe to his channel. They might even say bad things about his channel. You never know. And, you know, wow, it would be really terrible if a tiny cult of anti-Semites said bad things about you, right? That's really going to cost you, you know. Take it from me. Nobody saying, you know, assholes saying bad things about you never costs you. I've only ever gotten more popular and more successful the more people say crap about me. So, you know, that's a life lesson for you, the basic expert. But, you know, he wanted those 40 subs, and so he wasn't going to do this. Right? And he saw, this was before Jethro's anti-Semitic tweets came out. He was a guest on Inappropriate Characters. And there, we asked him tough questions, and his fans didn't like that. They're like, how dare you attack? How dare you not just let him talk and talk and talk about how wonderful the Bro-SR is, and agree with him about one time, and stop questioning the cult-like aspects of our movement? You know, how dare you not do that, right? And they got mad at me for it because I made Jethro look stupid, right? But, you know, that's actually what you're supposed to do. If he's not able to not make himself look stupid, right? Like I said, I asked Ryan David some tough questions. Ryan David might have ended up looking stupid, but he didn't, because he knew how to address those questions. The problem Jeffro has is he's not very bright, God help him, you know, and his ability to address stuff is quite poor. All right, Samuel Buchanan sent me a $20 super chat. Wow, thank you. I think that's the record at the moment. I really appreciate that. I've just discovered that I've got super chat abilities now. I never used to have them. I guess it's because I'd applied for them at one moment. It said there's something about the Uruguayan government didn't let them happen in Uruguay, right? So I guess now that's been resolved. Thank you, Uruguayan government, and thank you, YouTube. So I guess that meant that like they started happening automatically or something from way back when. So Samuel Buchanan says, "Hail Pundit, what are your thoughts on 5e's overlap between caster mechanics in spite of differences in concept, ability score, and spell source? They're conceptually separate. They should be mechanically separate." I'm not sure. I'm trying to understand what you mean by this. So I think what you mean is like that basically the magic system in 5e operates the same regardless of whether you're a druid, a wizard, or a cleric, or what have you, right? And that, you know, that it all works the same. Like a cleric doing magic looks the same and works the same as a magic user or a druid or a bard doing magic. I think that's always been a trait of D&D, but it is in some ways kind of a flavor weak spot, you could say, right? Like I think it's a lot more interesting. In my Lion and Dragon, like the basic mechanic is the same: a spell casting check, a d20 plus your level plus your ability score. In Lion and Dragon and the Divisible College, in all my games, that's the mechanic for magic type stuff, and that is that's the same mechanic if you're a cleric or a wizard, except that you're using a different ability score. but the actual magic looks very, very different. If you've ever played Lion Dragon, you know that clerics have magic that's based on prayer and is relatively quick and spontaneous, right? Like you pray to God for a round and then the miracle happens or it doesn't, right? And magicians, on the other hand, the magisters, they have to go through all kinds of rigmarole. They have these complicated rituals. They have to do purifications. If they don't, there's penalties to the check. And they have to have the right ingredients, you know, which usually involves fairly expensive incenses or oils or special crystals or talismans or things like that, right? And then they have to perform the whole ritual, and then the ritual happens and the magic is there. Now, usually the magic ends up being in the form of some kind of benefit that is long lasting or some kind of object that can then activate for the effect at a certain time, like a talisman or something, right? Which is how medieval magic worked for magicians. And, you know, the cleric magic in Lion and Dragon is how medieval miracles worked for saints, right? Saints would pray and then stuff would happen, right? So that's how I made them different, right? And I think that that's a very neat concept that you can put into your magic systems. Actually, I guess I can reveal this. I don't think it's a secret. Mad Scribe magazine, published by the publisher of Sword and Caravan, Mad Scribe Press. The first two episodes, they had me do an article, and they asked me to do another one for the third issue. And they specifically asked me to do something about magic. And what I'm writing is kind of about this, about how you should think about what kind of magic, like how magic works in your game, if you're doing a homebrew, right? And if you're doing a setting on how the way magic works affects how society is and how society reacts to magic, right? So that's going to be the article in issue 3, I guess, of Mad Scribe magazine. But anyways, thank you for that super chat. Let's see what else we have to say here about if there's anything more about the basic expert conflict, or if we're ready to go on. Pundit out of Chatelet says, out of curiosity, have you heard the game Wolves of God? It's basically L&D fan sex in England. I have heard about it. I haven't seen it. I haven't read it, actually, but I've been told it's quite good. I have reason to believe it would be. And yeah, it's basically early medieval authentic gaming, too. Like, it's actually about the same period, like close to the same period as Baptism of Fire is going to be set in. So if you've got Wolves of God, you're probably going to be able to, you could travel back and forth from PS Poland to Anglo-Saxon England, and there you go. It's cool. I would like to get a review copy of it sometime, but whoever wrote it, is that Kevin Crawford that did Wolves of God? Anyways, they haven't sent me the book. If they did, I would gladly review it. What next? Will in New Statement says, why the fuck would anyone look up a stranger's religious affiliation? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, unless that stranger is talking about religion, you know, I guess there. Automatic National Socialists on Roller Skate, new RPG title. Keon Cobra says, calling someone a grifter translates to a cheap attempt at authority. Well, I mean, I guess that's true when the basic expert called me a grifter. But, you know, I've explained how I define grifter in this context, and that explains why I think he is one. Because he's pretending that he's terribly torn up about all this while he's making high production value videos that required him to go and research my secondary channel, you know, and then cut and copy stuff and paste it with stuff from Twitter. It must have taken him hours of work to do that, because he knew he was going to get the views. So he did it because he wanted it to help develop the brand, you know. Reziel says, BLM was run by grifters. Hassan Piker is a great example. Okay, yeah, good example. let's see. Here we are. Yes, TB makes his name public. It's on his website. It's price. Okay, I just wasn't sure. I'd never heard it before. That's because I tend to think of people by their like handles, right? Like Diversity and Dragons is to me Diversity and Dragons or Double D or whatever, right? But I don't know if his name Bob or I'm not sure what his name is. To me, he's just Double D. So it's not just him. Like the Black Lodge guys are the Black Lodge guys, right? Or in best case, they're like Ginger Fraser, and what's his name, Team Leguizamo or whatever, young, yeah, well, yeah, young Leguizamo. Phoenix GM says, "What happened to Big Chungus?" Well, Big Chungus passed away over a year ago now, about a year and a half ago or so. She died. I'm sorry to say. Calvin says, "Does Meatball sleep on your bed?" Not as a rule, but she does sometimes. She doesn't have a single place where she sleeps. She'll like sleep anywhere. But she often sleeps like on chairs in the gaming room, in the living room. She'll often sleep in like there's a little corner spot here in this office that she sleeps on. And sometimes she likes to sleep on tall places, on shelves and things. And sometimes when it's very cold, she'll come to bed, right? And I'm going to be lying in bed there, covered in with like blankets and stuff. So I hear her mewing, and I have to lift up the blanket. And she'll crawl in under the blanket just to get warm, But that's usually it. Once in a while, also like sometimes when it's not really cold, but somewhere in between, she'll just walk on top and lie on the blanket next to me, But that's not very common. She's not like constantly sleeping on the bed with me or something. Let's see what else here. Otherwise, I'm going to get to my next topic. Jerry Harris says, unfortunately, criticism of individual Jews in power still makes you an anti-Semite according to the ADL, and they are powerful. Well, the ADL are stupid also, right? Like, and you can say that, and that's not anti-Semitic, right? Because they're a leftist organization that is actually weaponizing the accusation of anti-Semitism for political purposes. That doesn't mean that anti-Semitism doesn't exist. It means that the ADL is a horrible organization. They are a group of grifters, right? That have a propagandistic goal. But as a rule, criticizing someone, an individual who is Jewish for something other than being Jewish is not anti-Semitic. Now, there are ways you can be criticizing an individual Jew, and if you're suggesting that their individual actions are a product of their Jewishness, and that it's a fundamental quality of Jewishness that they're doing something bad, then that is anti-Semitic, even if you're just talking about one specific Jew, right? Because you're also at the same time claiming that this is a universal trait of all Jews, right? So therefore, it is a mass anti-Semitic. It's a collectivist racial condemnation, right? So it is possible at some occasions, but most of the times, no. If you're saying that you don't like George Soros because of his politics, because of his support for these communist district attorneys that turn cities like San Francisco into hellholes, that is not an anti-Semitic statement in any way, because you're talking about him. He happens to be Jewish, but none of what you've said has anything to do with his Jewishness, right? So I want to clarify, when I say that the Bro SR is full of anti-Semites, I'm talking about it's full of anti-Semites who collectively attack Jews for their Jewishness and suggest inherent false claims about evil qualities to being Jewish. All right, that is what they do. And, you know, we should have known, because really, like, he claimed, the thing is, Jethro likes to lie, right? Like, I remember once in the Google Plus era, I had asked him, well, you know, like, I think it was probably when he was published by Castalia House. I said, well, but you know, like, these guys are like serious alt-right people, you know, and stuff like this. And do you share these points? He goes, oh, no, I don't, right? Whatever. And you know, stupid me, I like to take people at their word. But of course, once they're blatantly open about what they are, you also have to take them for what they are. You know, and there's a bunch of people who think, well, it pisses off the left, so it's okay if we join up with this. And it's not. It doesn't work that way, right? It's nobody's saying that we need to start our own cancel culture campaign. But what is being said is that these ideas cannot be allowed to be normalized and unquestioned, right? Because then, you know, and to say that somehow you're being an SJW if you question someone who is suggesting that people of a certain skin color are inferior or are evil or should be expelled from the hobby or whatever, right? If someone's saying those things and you question it, that doesn't make you an SJW. that makes you someone who is actually fighting and standing up for the principles of the hobby. You know, there is no difference between Jeffro Johnson's anti-Semitism and the left's racial segregationism, you know, where they, like at Gen Con, they had the person of color only space, no white people allowed, right? The Wizards of the Coast bragging about how Radiant Citadel had no white people involved, right? And it's exactly the same to say that, you know, oh, we want a game with no black people, right? They said, if someone said that, that is 100% the equal level of vileness from one side to the other. You shouldn't tolerate either of them. And you shouldn't think that the side that's saying those things but are acting based about political correctness are on your side, because they're not, because they're actually just as collectivists, and they agree with almost everything that the collectivist racialist left believes in. They just support the other colored team, right? Their team, one of them are team white and the other one's team black, right? And or what have you, right? Like they're cheering for red and blue, but they actually have all the same assumptions. So these are not the people that are on your side. You should be on the side of people who just want a game, and to say, well, let's you know, everybody who wants to be there and who's there to game is okay to game, right? And let's not have politics in our hobby. Calvin says, I'm done with the bro. Sorry, I can't handle the workouts. Well, neither can Jethro Johnson, so that's not a surprise. That's another grifter. He created this whole movement based on this image of, you know, being muscle men and macho, right? And like he's never shown any proof that he is. Joseph Canal says, I have mad respect for you standing up against this anti-Semitism and challenging it. Well, I just think that's what anyone should do, right? Like, I mean, thank you, I'll say, but that should just be the normal thing to do. And for a long time it was. And then the left came along and decided that they could alter the racial formula. And suddenly the ability to condemn people as racists was lost because they destroyed the use of that word, right? So suddenly, you know, it used to be that saying that someone was a racist was a really, really serious thing to say. And you had to be really sure that they were really a racist, because it was a very serious thing that had very serious social consequences to call someone a racist in public. And then they started using it all the time. And it was the boy who cried wolf, right? Like they were saying it to people that everybody saw was not a racist. And so suddenly all utility of that as an element of social damning, of social condemnation was lost. And that's a terrible thing, specifically because now you have these maniacs on either side that can act with impunity, because as soon as you call them a racist, they'll just say, oh, you're just an SJW. You know, and then that somehow they somehow play that as. I think we got a pause there. Are we back? Still working? Okay, I hope so. Don't know what happened just there. Let me know if you can still hear me. I hope I'm still filming here. Okay, it's back. Good. Because I did still have one more thing to talk about, but I just want to see how some more of the comments here. Noijitat says TBE just wants to talk about games on his gaming show. I don't think it's fair to demand he dress down a guest based on 2 edgy tweets. Well, look, that is something that he has the guy there. He wants to talk about games. Well, he wants to talk about the games movement. Then he needs to talk about the fact that this guy is in a movement that promotes certain ideas. One of those ideas is nobody should play OSR games, right? Nobody. That's one of the ideas of the BroSR. The BroSR says the only right game to play is AD&D First Edition rules as written. And second, he should be asking, well, hang on, but these aren't the rules as written. And he didn't do that either. He pretended that these were the true rules as revealed by the Lord Gygax to the prophet Jeffro, and that they're correct. But in fact, Jeffro's idea of 1-1 time appears nowhere in the rules as written of AD&D First Edition. Jeffro constantly argues against the use of Rule 0, but Rule 0 appears in multiple places in AD&D First Edition. So he's a liar and a cheat and a swindler, right? All on those bases. And then he's an anti-Semite on top of that, which I think is an important thing to bring up. If you're otherwise allowing him to promote his movement, which is a cult-like movement that people join and become part of. And so if someone is thinking of joining that bandwagon, they should kind of know if they're going to spend money on his products. Like if he was a radical supporter of Antifa, who is in favor, has made multiple tweets about how white people should just die and how it should be okay to kill anyone who voted for Trump or something like that. If he'd done something like that, then, would you not want to know about it before you buy his book? Even if his book didn't have that, like, wouldn't you think, well, do I want to give money to someone who's talking about this, right? Who's saying this sort of thing, right? Then it is relevant to understand the context of that. And it's because he didn't also, it's not like this wasn't a doxing thing. It wasn't something that he said in private to someone somewhere else or something that he did in some account that has nothing to do with his gaming account. This was his account, Jeffro Johnson, him in the BroSR, among the BroSR, talking about BroSR stuff and making these blatantly anti-Semitic comments. So it is perfectly reasonable. And it's not just reasonable. You as an interviewer have a responsibility to bring it up. Absolutely you do. All right. My name says, one of the things that always annoyed me with pretty much every game is that the first thing any society would have done is working magic to improve food production. Well, yes, because throughout history, people have worked magic to improve food production. Yeah, in every culture, there is a lot of magic that is about making bountiful harvests, or making it rain. That is actually what people did. And so, yes, any magic would do that, yes. Hans von Bartel says, F the trolls, pundit is all that matters. Thank you. A lot of people talking about Dolmenwood. I was saying, I've heard only good things about it. The Kickstarter seems to be promising and everything. Now, one thing that worries me is like they're talking about it's based on traditional British fairy tales and folklore. That sounds, that could be really good, right? But then I saw somewhere where they brought up like the term whimsy, and as soon as that word shows up, I get a little worried because it sounds to me whimsical in fairy tales is usually only something that you would have seen in the Victorian version of British fairy tales, right? The Bowdlerized version. Now, the Victorian fairy tales are still all fine and good, right? And they are still, in many ways, much more weird and much more dark and much more interesting than, let's say, the Disneyfied version of the fairy tales. The problem is that fairy tales and folklore of the English tradition have gone through several steps, each one making them lesser than the last, right? So like the last is Disneyfied version of fairy tales, where it's just, pretty crappy. But even those still, there's still enough of it that a lot of them make good viewing, right? And for kids and whatever, right? But they're very saccharine and what have you, but there's still something there, right? But those were borrowed from the Victorian fairy tale tradition, and that is better, but it's still very, very whitewashed and cleaned up version of the real fairy tales, which are the ones of the Middle Ages, the real folklore. And the difference between those two is when you add the word whimsy, because the Victorian and Edwardian versions of the British fairy tales can be thought of as whimsical. And so, and they're all, there's all this twee stuff, and it's all like kind of la 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 out in the forest and all this. Like, I don't know how to describe it, the right way to describe it, but you know what I mean, right? It's like it's all flowery and very prim and proper, and all very Victorian and very Edwardian. It's foppish. It's written for upper class children to have these stories read to them by their nannies, right? And they clean up a lot of the real intense kind of weirdness and gruesomeness and sometimes salaciousness of the medieval versions of the fairy tales. So, like that's, so I'm hoping Dolmenwood is not just going to be like a Victorian British setting. I don't know, maybe it is. And if it is, well, okay, fine. But that's a little less exciting. Although maybe it's better for me because it's less competitive with Lion and Dragon or Dark Albion, because Dark Albion and Lion and Dragon take a lot of their inspiration out of fairy tales and folklore of medieval England, right? And the real stuff. Like if you want to see an example in the Old School Companion 2, you have the medieval authentic adventures, right? And among those, there's the story of Tam Lin, for example. And this is like a real medieval fairy tale. And it's about like this elf that comes along to this abandoned ruin in a manor there in an area where he creates a magical circle of roses, and then he basically catches people's attention, and eventually the local maidens find out that this super sexy elf lives there, and you should never go there because if you do, he's going to seduce you, right? But he won't if you take a mantle with you, and but then he'll take your mantle, and so that's symbolic. And then the daughter of the local lord has heard them say that, and she's a bit of an adventurous girl, and she can't resist. She goes over there, then they fuck, like that's the first part of the fairy tale. Then she gets pregnant, and he's going to try to stay with her, but it turns out that the queen of the fairies is hunting him, and so she's going to have to go off and rescue him, right? But then at the end, it turns out he was really an asshole all along. He just kind of used her, and she ends up cursing him because it's very tragic. The original version of that story is very tragic. Anyway, so I made that into an adventure. It's one of the adventures in the Medieval Authentic Companion 2. And it's like, that's real fairy tale stuff, so that's the sort of stuff you want to check out. And I hope that Dolmenwood has more of that than the other sort of thing, but I don't know. Because either way, it sounds like it's going to have a lot of compatibility with Lion and Dragon. So great, I'm happy for that. Let's see what else we have to say here. Stuff on Kiozin books, okay. My name says there's nasty people in every race, color, and religion. Nobody's got a monopoly on assholishness, right? And no specific race has some kind of fundamental trait that is based on their race that is evil or something like that. Rezal says, I won't support any wokists or SJWs or what have you, but I wouldn't silence them, let their terrible ideas hang themselves out in the open. Yeah, well, that's exactly what I told the basic expert about Jethro. I never said you can't have Jethro Johnson on there, or you should cancel Jethro Johnson, or you should unperson Jethro Johnson. No, I said you should make him have to talk about what he actually believes. That's it. You shouldn't let him lie either openly or by omission to your viewers, because I wouldn't do that, right? That's all it was. All right. Elle says, Pundit, what is your take on Clownfish TV teaming up with Justin Lanassa's PR guy? Well, okay, so they're not teaming up with Justin Lanassa. They're teaming up with someone that was previously associated with Justin Lanassa to make their new tabletop RPG. Well, I don't think that. I mean, I watched some Clownfish videos. Obviously, they're quite popular, but I don't think very much about them in general. And I really question, like, how much do they actually know about the RPG hobby? Like, is the guy from Clownfish, is Neon, like, does he watch my channel? You know, otherwise he doesn't know anything about the hobby. I mean, well, maybe if he watches the Basic Expert, but then he'll be tricked into joining the ProSR. Yeah. So no, but I mean, as far as I know, like I question their ability to make a tabletop RPG, and I'm guessing it's going to end up looking a bit like what they call a fantasy heartbreaker, right? Because I don't know if they're getting the right consultation, you know. And I'm not exactly sure why they're doing it. Maybe they're doing it just as merchandising, and well, then whatever, right? But I suspect their RPG isn't going to change the world. Crap phone has to go. Good night, crap phone. You're probably gone already by the time I say this. Sorry. Holy crap! There's still so much to catch up on here. Jonathan Klinker says maybe you should stop talking about the BroSR. Well, BroSR, another bunch of guys that just, I mean, Jethro Johnson loves quote tweeting me in the hopes that will get him more attention too, right? But as a rule, I try not to bring attention to them. The problem is that this whole thing with the Basic Expert has obliged me to have to put them contextually into the explanation, you know? Al says, this just in. I don't know if this is real or not. The Basic Expert admits he has no content in his latest community post on his YouTube channel. His solo RPG series is a failure. Is that right? Is that real? Oh, okay, it's sort of real. He says, I guess the Basic Expert says that he's trying to think of ideas because he feels like his solo gaming how-to series needs more than 2 episodes. All right, I don't think that's exactly an accurate description what you did there, but that is funny. Let me see here. Drew Andrews says, "Do you see? Oh, always with the book suggestions. You guys tonight have been brutal about this. Any suggestions on good books on the anarchy or the aftermath of the Mongol invasion on Jinsong society? Maybe more interested in history. Oh, yeah, I can't think of good titles for either of those at the moment. My brain is not working that well. I mean, the consequences of the Mongol invasion on Jinsong society is that Jinsong society stopped existing. You know, the song lasted a little bit longer, but only a few. They only lasted till Kublai Khan, so it wasn't that much more time. But basically, that was it. They were gone, right? I mean, someday someone really needs to write this really epic book about like the Mongols. Genghis Khan was in some ways the maker of the modern world. He was the most influential person in some ways, because there's a before and after of him. Before Genghis Khan, the most sophisticated regions of the world were the Middle East and China. And India and Europe were, to different degrees, more backwater, right? And then what happened is Genghis Khan comes along. He destroys everything in China. He destroys both the Jin and the Song, who are the two warring dynasties at that time. I got a meatball. We have meatball. Hello, meatball. Sorry. You can sit on the left, meatball. Sorry. They all wanted to see you. I know you don't like me to do that to you, but there you go. So they destroyed all of Chinese society, and then they destroyed all of the Islamic society as they were at that time. And this had a number of consequences. They also tried to invade India and tried to invade Europe, but they were less successful. In both cases, they kind of gave up. They were stopped in Europe eventually by the Hungarians and the Poles for the most part. So they destroyed all the Proto-Russian civilization. That's important too, the Volga Rus. So everywhere that they destroyed, those cultures, when they rebuilt, they became ultra reactionary and backward looking in the case of both the Muslims and the Chinese. So that they were suddenly they were much more reactionary and unwilling to make any social change. Like to them, they were like, we want to rebuild to what we were in the days of glory of the Song, or we want to rebuild like we were in the days of the Abbasid Caliphate, and we're never going back. Right? We're going to be this again forever, right? And so they stopped being forward-looking. They were the two most forward-looking civilizations at the time, and then they became the exact opposite. And the Russians just went crazy, right? Like they literally, everything insane about Russia is due to the fact of the destruction of the original Novgorod Volga Rus society that was existing. The Novgorod and Kievan Russian civilization, which was relatively sane, was wiped out, and then you had the Muscovite Russian civilization post conquest of Genghis Khan, or of the Mongols, and they were never quite right in the head. As if I think a lot of what they do is still based on the idea that at any second a Mongol horde could come by and burn their city to the ground. I don't know. But in Europe and in India, those things didn't happen. And in India, what you had is like some of the great especially like the remnants of the Ghurid and the Khwarezmian dynasties of the Silk Road, of these like the guys that made these incredible cities and stuff. They ended up going into India and they formed the Delhi Sultanate. And this would led to a revitalized period in India. And then later you had the what was it? The Muslim conquerors of northern India. I'm forgetting their name now. Sorry, if anyone can remember oh my God, that's such a mental block. All right, it's getting late, I guess. Sorry about that. But anyways, later Muslim groups, there were later Muslim invasion forces that ended up taking over. I'm sure it'll come to me at any second now. That ended up taking over northern India, and they became part of Indian society, right? But anyway, so those places became more advanced and the others became backwards. And that's still that to this day, right? Like India was the most functional of all the post-colonial societies that were like, after World War II, most of the former colonies got pretty darn screwed up, right? But and India isn't perfect by any means, but India is largely a creation of the colonial enterprise, but it's also a creation of the influences of these earlier societies that were dynamic societies that were not horrifically traumatized by Genghis Khan, So it kind of determined everything. All right, so let me get somewhere down here to catch up, and then I'm going to give you guys my big announcement, which I hope you'll find interesting. It is something new that I've come up with, and it is still tentative, but it'll be. It is an interesting thing. You can guess in the comments as to what it is. But RPG Pundit says, "Do you know anyone who's made in-depth fraternal societies for D&D?" Well, I've got in RPG Pundit Presents. I have several medieval authentic secret societies and weird Gonzo organizations. Those I've done like I think 2 of each in the RPG Pundit Presents series. So you can check those out if you like. That's what I'm going to do for now. When someone asks me for a book recommendation, I'm just going to recommend my stuff. Because otherwise I'm never going to get done here. Same Rice says, RPG Pundit, how big are the bugs where you are? Some bugs are very big. Let's put it that way. There are very big cockroaches here. There are big spiders, though those are mostly in the countryside, but there are big-ish spiders in the city. Anyway, there's big meatballs also. She's on my lap right now, nice and relaxed. She says, I'm married to a Russian family and have spent a lot of time there. People can be pretty awesome. I've spent a lot of time with Russian people, and they can be pretty awesome. Most of them are also kind of nuts. You have to admit that, right? Like, it's a cultural trait. They are, all Slavs are kind of eccentric, right? So that includes me in the deal, but Russians take the cake in some, at least all the ones I've met. I've met quite a lot. Let me see here. Jerry Harris says Indians had no concept of India as a country until they saw it in the British map with all that. Well, that's true in the sense of nation state, right? What they do have is a variety of other concepts. They have a concept of Bharata, right? And Bharata is the Indian civilization. They also have within that like a concept of something like the Hindutva, right, which is specifically Hindu civilization, right, which are 2 slightly different things. Because Bharatan civilization kind of recognizes the possibility of elements that are not Hindu, right? But this is you're right that it's not like the idea of India as a country only exists because of the British Empire, right? Otherwise, it would still be a whole bunch of different little countries. All right, so now we're done. I'm caught up, I think. Okay, one person I think has made a guess here. Eric C says the subscription thing you mentioned before. Yeah, in one of my community posts, I asked people if they'd be interested, like if I ever set up some kind of a deal for doing subscriptions where people could pay a fixed amount every month, and they would, in exchange for this, they'd be able to get like a couple of PDFs of books that are like very, how do you say, very low production, like just kind of, we're talking about like very indie style stuff, would not be high production, like not a lot of art or stuff like that, but would be like new content, and that would be exclusively available to people who subscribed. So it's kind of, that's what's on offer there. And I guess I can say that what I've been planning to do is, and I am now in the middle stages, I guess, of negotiating this with a certain website called Giant Slayer Games. So if I'm guessing a lot of you are familiar with this. Giant Slayer Games is an online site where you can purchase PDFs and print, I believe, too, of RPG products. So it's a similar site to Drive Through RPG or to the what's the other one? Oh geez, I'm not trying to be insulting here. It's just I'm having some memory lapses today. The Big Geek Emporium. That's it. The Big Geek Emporium. So it's similar to that. Giant Slayer is the newest guy on the block there, and I reached out to both of them. Big Geek Emporium didn't really answer. Had some like they never really got back to me, and Giant Slayer did and was interested. It's an interesting concept, but of course, what I'm suggesting to them is something new that I think that they're going to then be able to kind of put into action with other people too, right? Like I can imagine, I don't know, the Red Room might like doing something similar, right? Where what there will be is not just a storefront for buying PDFs one at a time, but a subscription service where people can like subscribe to get the PDFs, you know? So yeah, I think that's basically what I'm planning to do, which is it's not totally finalized yet. So I'm kind of slightly jumping the gun here. It might all fall apart if like the technology doesn't work out or the deal doesn't work out. Because part of what I'm trying to do, like having not found publishers that are willing to do, I'm not wanting to like really have a three-way cut. I'm trying to figure out how this can be done in a way where, you know, in exchange for the fact that I'm the goddamn RPG pundit, and having me on there will no doubt be something that will draw more attention to the website. They will give me certain concessions of assisting me a little bit with the publishing process, right? So they're not really going to be a publisher because it's going to be, like I said, we're going to be talking about very bare bones stuff. So it'll be me providing people with material very similar to the RPG Pundit Presents, but you know, probably with less art, and that's it. You know, like so, like because it's not, I'm not going to go to the effort to do those things. But what you will get is really good content for your products, for your gaming. There'll be a whole bunch of topics. There's a lot of stuff that I've been thinking of that I was thinking of doing as another Pundit Presents series. The problem is Spectre Press is very slow these days for publishing, so I was thinking of doing of going with somebody else. But then I came up with this idea, and I think this is a good idea. So there will be, as usual, there'll be like adventures for like my various settings or for generic OSR type settings. There'll be lots of historical related stuff. There'll be locations that expand either Sword and Caravan or Lion and Dragon or Baptism of Fire. There'll be lots of stuff on like, you know, generators. So like to generate, I don't know, NPCs, to generate dungeons, to generate encounters in cities, or, you know, magic items and organizations and all that sorts of, all the stuff that you see in the Pundit Presents series, but, you know, new ones, completely new. And maybe at some point, once, yeah, again, like if once I've got 50 of them on, you know, banked, I might go to another one of my publishers, maybe Spectre, maybe somebody else, and have them do a compilation volume, right? But for the, at first, the content is going to be exclusively for the subscribers, right? Like you'll subscribe and you'll get a couple of these every month. I think that's how it's gonna be done. You know, that's not, you know, like I said, we're still in the process of negotiations, but I figured it was a good time to tell you guys about it. Find out what you think about this. Do you think it's a cool idea? Is it the sort of thing that you would be putting money to get? You know, you know, what if you have any comments about Giant Slayer games or warnings or whatever, they've been very, you know, they responded relatively quickly, and they've been very professional in their interaction with me, and so far it looks like it's doing quite well. So I'm thinking that that's pretty good. The answer says, I do Big Geek Emporium. What happened to Red Room was bullshit on drive-through. Well, apparently, I believe Red Room are on both, right? Like, I think that there's Red Room stuff on Giant Slayer, as well as, yeah, there is. There's definitely. I'm looking it up right now, and yes, it's there. Yeah. So, you know, they're basically very similar to each other. I think Big Geek Emporium, well, apparently the attention to potential clients is a little bit better because they actually answered me. And I've heard that Big Geek Emporium had like some kind of issue, was having some problems. Like this, the problem is that these are like probably both one-man operations, as far as I know, and so that's tricky. And I can understand why, like most of my publishers, which are not big publishers, but they're busy publishers, didn't want to have to go through the bother to be on either of these, right? So I can't really blame them for that, especially because chances are that that's the volume of sales that will be generated there is going to be a lot smaller in most cases than it would be on drive-through or Amazon or Lulu. But with a model like this, what it might do is it might bring a bunch of people in to subscribe to my service, who will be, getting the PDFs that I make. But while they're there, they're going to be also looking at all this other stuff that is on Giant Slayer games. So that might be really good for them, right? I think that that's part of the appeal for them. So I think it's good. and it's not in my plan to ask them for some kind of like special, some kind of super special deal, but just realistically, because again, I'm a Luddite, I'll need some kind of help, and if I can't do it myself and they want this to happen, they're going to have to provide me with some kind of slight assistance in putting together these PDFs, and obviously how to upload them all. I don't want to learn any of that stuff. That's why I'm not a publisher. I refuse to do that. I want to focus on writing stuff on a Word program and then sending it to someone else who magically transforms it into like a work of art, into like something brilliant, by like adding all the other stuff except the righty bits, which is what I do. That's it. Well, I sent the Big Geek Emporium multiple messages. Calvinoni says 2 people at Big Geek Emporium, but yes, it's possible they didn't get your message. I sent them multiple messages in multiple places, and then I did eventually get an answer somewhere saying, "Oh, yeah, we can talk," or something like that. But by that time, I was already talking with Giant Slayer, right? So, and they've been much more responsive. So yeah, I think I'm going with Giant Slayer. They seem to be doing quite well. And so like this would be good. It would be good for them, and it would be a place where I can make, because I want to do another whole series of small products like that. But problem one is it's very hard to find a publisher who's willing to do that schedule, because in some ways it's harder to be able to have to push out a single small product every 2 weeks or whatever, or every 15 days, than it is to do one big book that can be done anytime between now and 2 years from now, given the way that they do their schedules. And so like, this way of doing it, if it's in a subscription model, additionally, it means that people will commit to it. It'll be a way for people to give support to me without having to remember to go out and buy the next book that I say so on my video or something. They can just subscribe, and then they can stick to subscription unless they get a bunch of issues that they don't like, and then they can cancel if they want to, right? Like it's not going to be a locked-in subscription or something like that. You can it'll be like Patreon. You can withdraw your support if you like after a month or whatever. But it'll be something that allows for I hope that it'll have enough people interested that it'll make it worth the effort, right? And for both me and for Giant Slayer. So tell me what you think. Are you someone who's gotten a ton of Pundit Presents stuff? Would you be the type of person who would pay something, whatever it would be, maybe, I don't know, $5.99 or something to get a couple of smaller PDFs a month with brand new material of stuff that you can use? Don't all answer at once now. So suddenly there's no commentary. Okay, Keon Corwin says I might buy that. All right, well that's something. Because I really do want to know, right? Like if there's like everybody saying no, it's a shitty idea, I might have to rethink it. But I think it could be a good idea. I think it's the sort of thing that could work. My name says my son has bought just about everything you've written. I'll ask him. So like anyways, oh yeah, DMC Draws says I'd buy into the subscription. Okay, that's good. That's good. L says make it $30 a year and do 13 issues, one every 30 days. $30 a year for 13 issues. If those issues are, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that quite works out. I don't think that would work out all that well for either me or Giant Slayer Games, because you got to remember the margins on this become quite slim, right? So like it is a lot of work to do something like RPG Pundit Presents, where I was at one point I was basically writing one supplement a week, and that supplement was like the smaller sized ones might have been only 4 or 5 pages, the bigger ones maybe 10 to 15 pages, right? But you're doing that every single week. It's a grueling schedule, and it means you have to get a sufficient volume of sales for it to end up being really worth it. And it was with RPG Pundit Presents. I'm hoping it could be with this. So I'm hoping that there'll be enough people that'll be interested. Now I know, like, of course, yeah, you can get a book for $30. That would be, 13. Let's say 13 issues. Let's say I was 130 pages that you might pay $30 for. And the cumulative effect of the subscription would probably be more than that. But part of it is like the idea of patronage, right? Like this is a kind of patronage. This is the sort of thing that if I didn't want to do it on Giant Slayer Games, I could do on Patreon, for example. And then maybe I'd get a bunch of people just joining my Patreon. But I thought instead of giving money to Patreon, I'd rather give a cut of the money to something like Giant Slayer Games, right? And there's going to be people that are going to go to Giant Slayer to buy other stuff. They're going to say, oh shit, the RPG Pundit's here, right? And look, he's got the subscription service, so they might join in, right? So that might be a what would you call it, a supplementary source of people to subscribe, people that are going there not for me, but rather going there for other stuff and discover that I'm on it. So yeah, this is the stuff, right? And like, so I'm thinking of doing 2 products a month that are going to be like, so again, they're going to be, I think what you'll get is like a minimum guarantee of a total of 10 pages. So like at the very least, they would be like 2 5-page supplements or something like that. But sometimes you might get like one that's like a 3-page supplement, a 7-page supplement. Sometimes you might get something that's like 2 20-page supplements, because I was inspired. Because honestly, whenever I was doing these with Pundit Presents, I was never thinking of a page limit. I was thinking, this is something I want to write about, and I'd start writing, and I do however long it took, right? So there were some Pundit Presents books that are like, I think that's like the shortest one is like maybe 4 pages long or something like that, 3 or 4 pages. So quite a short supplement, not counting the ones that ended up being listed as free, right? Like there was the expanded spell tables. I think that was a 2-page supplement, but that one was like free to download or pay what you want or something like that. But the ones that actually cost something, there was a couple that were 99 cents that were like under 5 pages, right? And then like the biggest one I ever did was, I think, well, not counting the one that still hasn't come out yet. So I think that the biggest one I ever did was maybe 20 pages or something, 20 something or low 20s, right? But it wasn't that in one of them I was planning to do that, or it was just, this was the subject that I wanted to write on. And so I wrote it, right? Like, because I want to make a good book, right? And I think that's how it's going to be here. But I think that if I'm doing 2 products in a month, chances are that collectively there'll be more than 10 pages in total quite easily. It's quite likely that that'll happen, right? And so and because they'll be on 2 different topics, even if, let's say, one of the 2 topics, so I'll be varying it as I go along. Sometimes it'll be adventure, sometimes it'll be setting stuff, sometimes it'll be historically authentic, sometimes it'll be fantasy or Gonzo, sometimes it'll be Sword and Caravan stuff, sometimes it'll be Dark Albion stuff, right? Or maybe there'll be some Star Adventure stuff. I've been thinking about that. So that'll mean that, you know, even if one of the two of that month is really of a topic that, however interesting, is not like immediately touching on your particular RPG needs, the other one might be, right? That doubles the odds. That's my reasoning behind it. But you could, if in the comments you have a different idea, right, you could please let me know. So let me see. Robert Duckworth says, sounds great, Pundit. I'd be into that. Robert, that's another one of my Sword and Caravan players. Keon Cobra says, I think Pundit's Pipeweed of the Month Club with free PDFs is actually good. Well, yeah, except then I'd get into all kinds of trouble with the tobacco laws, you know. Resiel says, I might be able to do a subscription. I need to see the cost and the content. Well, again, you can always try it for 1 month, right? Like then whatever it is. I still don't know what the final cost would be. I'm guessing, yeah, like it'll be a reasonable price. I'm not going to charge you $50 a month or something like that. You know, like we'll figure out something that'll be probably cheaper than if you were buying 2 PDF short products, right? So like that's I think where the thing lies, right? So it'll probably, you know, my name says on $6 a month, right? Okay, that's $5.99 is kind of the number I have in my head right now. Actually, that's the one that I've kind of been fixating on. But you have to see, right? Like that some of that will depend on what Giant Slayer says, because there are going to be costs involved, right? They have their cut, and they have to also be happy with whatever the deal ends up being, right? Jeffrey Garrison does not like subscriptions, but Patreon is proof that subscriptions work. Yeah, they work in some cases, right? Edgelord says, I'll sub for sure. Thank you, Edgelord. Rezo says, I've bought some of your books, Pundit, but primarily stuff that's most widely useful for all gaming. So if the content gets very specific for L&D, the sub might be less valuable. Fair enough. Fair enough. You know, like most of my adventures, I mean, the stats are technically the L&D stats, but those are very similar to any other OSR stats. So like most of my adventure stuff and a lot of my setting stuff and definitely a lot of my fluff material, like I've written some of the Pundit Present stuff was like, you know, organizations, like weird secret organizations, secret societies of the Middle Ages or things like that, where I have like, there's literally no mechanical part to it. It's just all descriptions of these groups and what they did and what their motives were and how their actions were, right? So like there was all little or no RPG mechanical content in there, right? So those are literally universal products. L says, I don't know what things are worth anymore. People just paid $80 to have virtual gay sex with a bear. Glenn Gilbert says, I have all the Lion and Dragon source books and compilations and Sword and Caravan. I'm very happy with them. Would consider subscribing for new content. Great. Edward says, I'd love World of the Last Sun or Star Adventure. Well, there's more World of the Last Sun stuff to come for sure. And I mean, it's a campaign that's still going on, so I can still be inspired by all kinds of crazy new stuff that has been happening in the campaign since the end of my main period of Pundit Presents, right? Like a lot of stuff has moved on since then. There's been new places and new weird things. So that campaign is an ongoing source of Gonzo inspiration. What's some of the content specifically you'd be doing without getting away? Well, I think I already mentioned some examples of that, right? Like, just a sec here. Let me see if I can grab it on the computer. So, like, stuff I'm thinking of are there'll obviously be adventures. There'll be new monsters, you know, medieval authentic monsters or setting authentic monsters or from different places. I've been interested in a lot of stuff about like interaction in urban environments. There might be some more like medieval city source books, like there was for there were some medieval city source books in Pundit Presents for like places like Kingston on Hull and Exeter. I could do similar stuff like that. Some of it for England, maybe some of it for other places. Like I would be really interested in doing a city source book for like Sword and Caravan era Baghdad, for example. My current Sword and Caravan campaign, the player characters have been at this time for the last several sessions have been in Baghdad, and of course I did a lot of research on like the Baghdad at that point in time, and it's just fascinating. And there's like it's an amazing, it's sort of like a fantasy city, right? Like it's like you're looking at this, you're like going, wow, that's hard to believe. Like they had 400,000 people for starters, right? Which is, in the Middle Ages at the same time. London had, I think, 15,000 people, 15 or 16,000, right? And Baghdad had 400,000 people living in it. And it was just unbelievable what it was, it was crazy. So, I might do a Baghdad city setting thing, right? I'm definitely gonna have a lot of random tables, sort of stuff, like maybe like how to generate adventures, or I've sometimes thought of trying my hand again at like I kind of like in Arrows of Indra, I have like a random dungeon generator, that is actually not dungeon, but it's like the Patala underworld, right? So like random underground exploration generator. And I've often thought of like trying to do other generators of that sort. I think there's a lot of stuff that I could still add about like medieval stuff, like maybe a book about like what is an actual medieval village like, or stuff like the medieval calendar year. I could probably do a bunch of stuff on, I don't know, Scotsman clans, like all kinds of stuff like that, and some weirder stuff like the planes, like extra planar stuff in maybe in Baptism of Fire or something. Lots more Gonzo stuff from World of the Last Sun, all sorts of things like that. Maybe some kind of like source book or adventures or new content of some kind for Star Adventure. I think eventually I'll probably try to do a setting for Star Adventure. That would be like a space opera setting, but that might require creating an actual big book, right? So maybe that'll be a project after Baptism of Fire or something. Who knows? My name says, I love the name Pundit's Pipeweed of the Month Club. Yeah, but some people might think that it's actually like, if I read that, I'd think, well, wait a minute, is that actually like a tobacco giveaway? And then I'd want the tobacco. Keon Corbett says, I want to smell the brands he's always talking about for what he's smoking. Yeah, I mean, I really should end up trying to like, unfortunately, I don't think you can get like, what is it? Like a paid promotion with a tobacco company on YouTube. Judd Goswick says maybe subs for the various subjects if people are worried about what it'll be useful for, that could mitigate that. Well, maybe. I mean, I guess it depends on how much of my pundit, if you look at the list of my Pundit Presents stuff and ask yourself how much of those would be interesting enough that if like you're only really paying like $3 for it, that it would be all right to get. And then kind of see, right? Because if that adds up, because the chat, again, like you guys know the sort of stuff I write, so like some of it might not be immediately useful for the current games you're running, but like the question is how much of it is stuff that you would never ever use because you'd never ever run that genre or have those sort of things in your campaigns. I think that's the way to look at it, right? Edgelord's got to go. All right, see you later. Thank you for coming. How many people are we at? We're at 86. We've still got a good number here, but I think it's getting close to time to end because I just realized that we've been like over 3 hours here. And well, I've gotten to like, the end of my list of stuff to talk about. I talked about Baptism of Fire. I talked about the basic expert, and I have talked about, I've given away the fact that I am working on, making a deal with Giant Slayer Games. Jonathan Klinger says, hey, RPG Pundit, have you ever heard of H.R. Giger? Yeah, I've heard of the guy, the one who did Alien, right? I'm not sure what is that like a reference to something? So yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see how this goes. It's still in the planning stages, still in the negotiation stages, but I'll keep you guys updated. And hopefully, and if it works out in a month or two, I might be putting out the first products. Don't get me wrong, Pundit, I will strongly consider subbing. Well, I appreciate that. I really do. And I'm thinking about how to do this because I mean, like, there's a couple of ways that it could work. That it could be it's a subscription, and when you subscribe every month that you're subscribed, you get 2 products, right? Like the 2 products come out that month. And then those products are not available individually commercially. And until, maybe after I've done like 50 of these, then a bunch of them could be compiled into a compilation volume, which will then be available for sale as a compilation volume. So that'll be a year or more down the road, right? That's the first option. The other option is that I could have a subscription service where, you're, let's say, I don't know, you're paying $5.99, and so the product is, you get 2 PDFs in a month for $5.99, and those 2 PDFs could then be put on sale maybe like a month later, but they would be like $5.99 a piece, right? So that would mean, but the question is then, like, would there be people that wouldn't subscribe because they would just kind of decide that they might just pick and choose specific products instead of going for the subscription? But if that was the case, is that like really a bad thing? I don't know. Like, the point is, what is the better deal? Like, obviously I want the better deal to be for the person to be able to subscribe and get all of these products at one price, and maybe offering the products individually to the general audience, even if it's for a higher price. It means that might mean that people would not do the subscription, but would that be bad? I don't know. It's a moral question, right? Like, I don't want to like make someone subscribe and then end up getting a bunch of stuff that they don't want, right? Like, but I mean, if you know the sort of stuff I write, you'll probably know the sort of stuff that I will produce. Jonathan Klinker says, Pundit, I was wondering what the HR Giger inspired settings would be. Well, I don't know. I probably wouldn't make those. It's not really my deal. Climbing that mountain says meatball t-shirts or a coffee table book of meatball and big chungus would sell. You could get $30 for a t-shirt. Yeah, but I see, I'm not an influencer. I don't want to be a marketing guy, right? Like, I don't want to make merch for people to wear, right? I want to make games that people will play. And you're probably right. Like, I'm sure that there would be some value in and people would buy the, Pundit Saved D&D t-shirt or something. Like, literally that happened back in 2014. There was a guy that did some, what was it? What did it say? RPG Pundit and Zach S saved D&D or something like that. They wore it at Gen Con. But that's just not it's not my style. I don't believe in t-shirts. So, okay, it sounds like we're wrapping up here. I really appreciate everybody who's been watching. And if you have any questions, I guess this is the last chance for questions and comments before we come to a close. Got Meatball right down here, but I don't think I can quite angle the video to show you. There she is. There she is from above. I don't know if that. I think all you see there is fur, basically, but there we have it. All right. So thank you, everybody. Please share this video everywhere you can. Like the video if you haven't liked it yet. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Thank you all for watching. And if you want to support me until I get that subscription service up, be sure to check out in the link to this video, or rather in the description to this video, you know, right there where it says I'll be taking your questions, blah blah, and then it says ... more. You click there, and you're suddenly gonna get this great big screen that has links to all my current products. You know, Dark Albion, Lion and Dragon, Arrows of Indra, the Old School Companion, the Pundit Presents series, Star Adventure, Cults of Chaos, World of the Last Sun, Invisible College, Old School Companion 2, Social Encounters, Sword and Caravan, Gonzo Fantasy Companion, the Wilderlands, everything. And the best way to support me is to pick up my products. And it's also the best way for you to get stuff that you're going to find really useful in your games, right? So why not, right? Like, I always wanted it to be that you get something that's worth your while, right? That I really would like that to happen. So yeah, that is one of the best ways that you could possibly support me. Thank you to everybody who did super chats, though. I really like that. I'm amazed that it's working now all of a sudden. I wish I'd known earlier. Well, I guess it just, you know, it only happens in live streams, right? So I guess that's when the moment was where it would be revealed. But that's great. I've got super chats now, so thank you for those who super chatted. And you know, thank you to everybody who supports me in whatever ways, including people that just, you know, share my content. I really appreciate that. And you know, you guys that sit around here and go to the live streams are like, you're the hardcore members of the Shitlord Army, I guess. And I appreciate you all most of all. I really do. Same Rising says, RPG Pundit, will there be an equivalent to Reddit in the Star Adventurer setting? The hell does that even mean? Like, what are some of these questions? What's going on tonight? Like, is this some kind of a meme, or are people doing some kind of a joke or something? Gnod says, first time I see your face, I like your face. So first time I see you in person, I like your face. You could be a great influencer. Well, thank you very much. But you know, I don't mind being an influence on people, but I don't want to be an influencer in the YouTube sense. Al says, a furry meatball. Did we just go to Olive Garden? I'm sorry. I do not understand that question about equivalent to Reddit. So if you're still around, same rise, I'll give you a second if you want to clarify, but otherwise. Olaf Blutenberg says, idea for a new source book, Cats of the Last Sun. That's not a bad one. Yeah. I've already decided what the first source book for the Baptism of Fire is going to be. Now, you know that the noble class in Poland are called the Slacha. And the Slacha, like all of the Polish people, they recognize themselves as Slavs. They're descendants of the Polans, whose founder, his mythological founder, was named Lech. And they came from a land called Pannonia, right? But besides that, the Slacha, the aristocracy, believed that they originally had come to Pannonia. And, you know, the common men was like, they were the regular Pannonians, but they themselves were originally from a land called Sarmatia, right? And this is a big part of like the mythological history of the nobility in Poland, that they were the Sarmatians, and that they have these noble horseman warrior horseman warrior traditions, right? And these codes of honor and these sorts of things that were all from the values of the great Sarmatians, right? So I've realized that what I'm going to do first for Baptism Fire is an NPC book, and it will be, of course, called 101 Sarmatians. Let's see here. I guess that's about it. Whether you like it or not, you're an influencer pundit. Oh, no. Well, between that and 101 Sarmatians, it's definitely time to end. So, okay, again, thank you to everybody who has posted, and really appreciate it again. And, well, we will see you guys soon. 2 weeks from now, on Sunday, it ought to be anyways, the Inappropriate Characters. So be sure to check us out there. I'll be there with, I guess that's the 27th of August. Yeah. On the 27th of August, check us out. Me, Venger, and Ryan, we're all going to be there. And we might have a special guest. I don't know for sure, but it seems likely. So, yeah, be sure to check for us there. And, of course, in between now and then, keep track. If you're subscribed, hit the notification bell so you can catch, you know, my community posts. I'm doing those any day that I don't do a video, pretty much. and my regular videos. There'll be more of that. I'm planning to do some more reviews coming up, some big ones, and all the other stuff, and for all your latest news and controversy. So I guess that's it for today. I think it went pretty well. Thank you all for coming. And now I've got to figure out how to leave. How do I quit this thing? No, that's for adding a guest. Oh, I think it's just this. Is it? Oh, yes. All right. Here we go. See you later, guys. Thank you very much. Oh, currently smoking the same pipe I started with.